Montcross Area Chamber of Commerce.
Pretty fast. Let me introduce my board chairman as he walks in the door. Jared? Todd is our chairman, our board chair this year, and Mark Gaunt, sitting right behind you, is our chair-elect with Belmont Savings Bank. We are, it'll take a few minutes, take as long as you want us to take, put it that way, as long as you want to ask questions. But we just want to express our appreciation for being here, being a part of the community. Y'all know probably more about the history of this chamber than I do, but it began as the Belmont Merchants Association in the 30s, but it transitioned into the Belmont Chamber of Commerce. And as I read some of the history, I guess it was about 2010, they were looking to grow membership in the area and some of the smaller communities in the area. So, they'd like to think about changing your name if you're going to reach out and change your geography a little bit. Long story short, I believe Belmont Abbey came up with Montcross. It was the Montcross project back in 2010. And so I guess the leadership of the chamber asked the Abbey if they could use that name, and they agreed. And that's how we became the Montcross Area Chamber of Commerce. I put a little packet together, a little something about the chamber, myself, and just the executive committee. And we have about 400 members. Probably, if I did a count, it might be a little closer to 380. But if anybody asks, did the pandemic impact small business? Absolutely. And I think at the time I got here at the end of 2021, I lose track of that year. Some people were talking like we had 500 members, and I couldn't find them. That's not, I'm not saying anything bad about anybody. I just said, where are they? Because nobody was around then. And if you went through the roster, some of those folks did not come back. They just kind of closed the doors. So we do our best count right now, and it's about somewhere between 380 and 400, which is a pretty darn good number for a community of our size, taking in even the smaller community. So, as you flip through some of the information I gave you, I don't want to bore you with Chamber 101 stuff. That first thing about there, it's under me where it says I have more than 30 years. I'm sort of embarrassed to tell you it's probably closer to 50. And I don't mind saying that, but I guess I just don't know how to quit. But we have, obviously, like most organizations, you want to make sure you've got a sound foundation and sound structure and purpose, vision, and mission. You all have seen them before. They're not all equal. There's a lot of difference between a vision statement and a mission statement, and I like to point that out there, but we'll find ours there. Important to us are establishing beliefs and values. And I gave you a list of our beliefs and values, and we place the needs of our members first, provide leadership to effect positive change, recognize and respond to our community's needs, proactively present our community to others, strive to achieve excellence in performance, display integrity of purpose and action, encourage and engage in cooperative relationships to achieve optimum results. That's what they are. You can add to that, probably take away from that. But it's important to have that there. Some of you, I think, attended a program we had last year called Finding Next, led by a lady by the name of Casey Steinbacher. And Casey was the chamber president of the Durham Chamber for a long time. And during that time, they created some programs in Durham that eventually led them to be named the #1 entrepreneurial city in the South. And if you know the history of Durham, that's a pretty big step. And this is what she says, and those things that you see, core values found in post-pandemic chambers. That's what she finds as she goes across the country doing her programs and that sort of thing. And I was really proud when she threw those up on the overhead or the PowerPoint, that if we think about our chamber and go back and look at some of the documents we have and our board has adopted, you will find this is true of us. Less about relevant and more about essential. There was a time when we talked about, there was a need to be relevant. Well, that's kind of old school now. There's a need to be essential. And how do you become essential? Because there's so many things to compete with our organization and others. Less about the chamber and more about the community. We want to really strive to understand what the needs, especially of Belmont are, but all of our communities, and try to work hand in hand with you and your leadership to make sure that we are addressing those needs. Less about convening, more about solutions. Less about advocating and more about influencing. Less about activities, more about the issues, and less from the comfortable and more from the uncomfortable. And when I say that, it's not always motherhood and apple pie. We have to sometimes take positions on uncomfortable issues, and that's how a community moves forward. We have an annual planning retreat like you do every year at our board, and Todd led this one this year, and Mark. And we adopted those 3, or maybe 4. I might have added part of one of these, but essentially the focus areas that you see on your sheet: membership, engagement, growth, and increased revenue. That one is going to remain at the top of our list probably for considerable years, just to get back to where we might, well, not necessarily back, but to build a strong financial foundation. Promote and support entrepreneurism and small business. We are a small business chamber. If you look at the makeup of our businesses, we don't have any huge corporate entities here. Some of them sole proprietors, some of them, but they're small. 3 to 5 would be pretty good. But we want to promote and support entrepreneurism and small business through mentoring, through what we now call Montcross Tomorrow. It used to be Montcross Emerge. DE&I, diversity, equity, and inclusion, and we've added and belonging. You'll see that on one of the pages here where I just wrote it in. But diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging. It's all about teaching our small businesses that the more they can get their teams and their employees to feel like they belong, and the more successful they're going to be able to add new jobs and grow. It's a lot more than people think it is. And then the advocacy part, which we really need to do more of influencing. And creating our brand and telling our stories. It's amazing how many people, they still don't know what a Chamber of Commerce does. So they figure we're in charge of the weather on parade days. But we do more. My mother died thinking all I did as a chamber person was hand out maps. And so I tried to tell her everything I did. I have included in here our 2023-2024 business plan. This organization, to my knowledge, I have not found one, has never had a business plan. Never go online and say, what is it you do? This is what we do. Now, do we do all of this? No. Right now it's me. When we get back to where we should be, it'll be me and 1.5 other people. Probably about 2.5 staff. But you can see those follow our focus areas, and that's kind of what we do. I put the statement in there on diversity, equity, inclusion, and I just added in pen belonging, because that's true. And I believe this is very critical to our present and our future. We sometimes have to drag people to the sessions, but once they get there, they go, wow, I had no idea this is what you were talking about. And we've got some great people in this community that can facilitate these kind of meetings. Coming up in the future, you're going to see us getting more involved in what we call healthy business and healthy people. We went through a period of time where people talked about, and we still talk about, making sure that our employees and our teams have time to spend with their family, mental wellness, give them opportunities to get checkups and all that. That's something that we will begin in the fall, and we've received a little bit of a grant from ADJOURNMENT Health to help us do that, so you'll see a little bit more about that. And you see me talk about a couple spots in here about increasing revenue and that sort of thing. I've got a couple little things over here, but we started a program called Legacy Partners. And if you go online, you'll see our Legacy Partners listed. We have their logo. And it's a way to raise more money. And this is above and beyond what they pay in dues. And we have right now 17 or so Legacy Partners that are putting in about $27,000 to the chamber, and it's all voluntary, and it's just on a one-year basis. Next year, we'll ask them to do the same thing or ask others to join. And without them, we wouldn't be able to do some of the things we're doing. And so that's the other thing. And the last thing is some people ask why people join the chamber. There are a lot of reasons, but I've tried to capture them. Connecting, learning, and doing business. That's what they're all about. Growing business contacts and connecting with other businesses. They want to grow their business. The best way they know to grow their business is to get involved with other people and sell those people, hopefully, their clients. Increasing business visibility. You take the Legacy Partners. It's only been out 6 months, but yet you get a phone call from a funeral home, and they say, "What is that?" And we tell them what it is, and they say, "Well, we don't see another funeral home on there." Well, you want to be on here? Yes. So they join. They're not on there right now because they're redoing their logo, but people see it and they want their brand out there. This thing goes out at the bottom of every email we send. It goes out. Of course, we go to meetings. It's there. It's on our website. Branding products and services, building relationships, access to resources and professional development, making a difference in the community. I don't think we can ever get away from being mission-oriented. People are not just going to join because they want their name in a business directory. They also want to join because they want to feel like they're doing something to make a difference in the community. And that's why you'll see so many things we do. We want to make sure that we're in sync with you to make sure the things we're doing are the things that you agree are good for the business, or good for the community. And then access to legislative leadership, advocacy, business resources. And that's all I have prepared. I just wanted to tell you how much we appreciate what you do. You'll notice I put a little a breakfast buzz out there. We're doing that on the 29th from 8 o'clock to 9:30, I believe. And we believe our members really want to know what's going on at Gaston College, and especially with the new Fiber Innovation Center, which is world-class. It will change a lot of things in the world, and it's right here in Belmont as part of Gaston College. So we have a program going on there, and we hope each of you will have an opportunity to come by. It's just an hour or so. And we have a program called Stepping Out. Mark's been. And we just do that once a month. Tell our people where we're going to be. They come out. This month, I don't know if it's gone out, but it should have. But it's the last day or so of the month, I believe, at Piedmont Lithium. And they're going to host it. It's almost going to be like a network after work, but it's our Stepping Out. So any opportunity we can get to give our members a chance to get together, network, learn something about the community, that's what we do.
Any questions? Do you want to give a quick pitch about the golf tournament? Because I have a request
Yes,
from Kramerton about
October the 20th. October 20th at Kramer Mountain. Last year we had our first merged, so to speak. That was called the inaugural tournament. We've been having one for years. They wanted to get something started over there because they do have a strong history of golf, and we needed help. And from a labor point of view and from a marketing point of view, we said, this sounds pretty good. Let's do it together. So this will be the first annual, I guess is what technically it is, since it can't be the inaugural. But they moved it. Good news, we've always held ours in the hottest part of July. And I guess that's what happens when you, in that community, you pull a few strings. So we're doing it on October the 20th. Two starting times, I think we have 8 o'clock start and 2 o'clock, maybe. Is it 2? 8 and 2. So we can fill up both morning and afternoon. And being October, a lot of people are actually, you would think that everybody wants to go morning, but a lot of people want to go afternoon because the weather's going to be a lot cooler.
And the mayor of Cramerton asked if we would be interested in fielding a team, because they're fielding at least 2. So he was trying to get some Belmont Cramerton collaboration, competition going on there. I don't really golf, but I'm sure there's somebody here who.
Yeah, I think last year their fire department walked off with the trophy. So we need fire or police to step up over here and.
No, we have one of the police
You guys
department.
bragged about winning last year, so Belmont needs to step up.
Yeah.
2 teams.
I mean, it would be kind of fun for Belmont to win Cramerton's golf tournament.
And we would, that's great.
But I mean, I have no problem with us sponsoring whatever we need, like work out some combination between staff and council and maybe put a team together if there's interest in that. Okay.
I'm interested.
Okay.
Anything we can do to help, we'll do that.
Okay.
Without the card.
Well, I'm thinking there's got to be somebody who works here who knows how to golf.
Yeah,
so.
we can pass that out.
The police and the fire department will set the challenge.
Okay.
Yeah, right.
Okay. Okay.
We can pass that along too.
Okay. Yeah. All right. Well, I'll let Nelson know that we'll figure something out.
Okay, good. Anything for y'all, we've got some great business people with pretty good expertise in certain areas, and I would love, from time to time, if the council saw some need to bring in some business expertise that you'd call on, we'd love to help you in any way that we can. And this entrepreneurial effort we're going to start hopefully in the fall. We've got the Toll Brothers both lined up, and they're, in my opinion, the epitome of entrepreneurs around here. And so we're going to try to establish sort of a council, an entrepreneurial council, so that small businesses that have that entrepreneurial spirit have some place they can go or call, ask questions, and try to find out where we go from here. So that's something we're going to be doing. So anything we can do. Yeah. Gentlemen, do y'all have anything to add?
We're just very thankful to be a part of this community and what we're doing and trying to build and shape the small business community as well. And be a great resource for you guys and them. So thank you for the opportunity.
Good.
Thank you.
All right.
Thank you.
Hold on, I just about to pull the whole thing out.
All right. Next up, we have the Environmental Sustainability Board.
Well, good evening. Good to be here with y'all tonight. I'm Kevin Gavin. I'm the chair of our Environmental Sustainability Board. I'd like to introduce a couple of my board members here. First, you saw passing out the flyers here is Maria Patel, and she is kind of our waste management, food waste and landfill expert. And we have Andrew here, he is our one of my energy pals right here. And so, we'll get them to talk a little bit about what they do and what we do. We've had to present to you of what we've been able to generate for the town, which is $5,650.71 presented to you, largely based on the work that we've done as a board. I want to talk just a minute about this. We're going to be looking pretty hard at that. As you guys know, we're a growing town. We have a lot of facilities that use a lot of energy, specifically our water sewer infrastructure does. I would tell you that my work as an engineer, consulting with electric co-ops, with utilities, with cities, is that, water sewer utility, the number 2 cost in those utilities is energy, electrical energy to push water around. And I'm going to tell you guys this, it's not going to get any cheaper anytime soon. And I think what we saw back over Christmas finally indicated that we're going to take an even deeper look into energy as a community here, because we don't want to see a repeat of that. We'll talk just a minute about that as we get through this together. But in addition to all this, we had our social media post that came up about 2 a month, just for some awareness. And so this committee stays pretty much focused on doing some work every day. Here's our presence at the farmers market, the Garibaldi Festival, and the community garden kickoff. As you can see, we're all wearing short pants, and it's pretty warm out there, kind of like it is today. So we do these festivals, so we're always very present out there and promoting the sustainability and City of Belmont's efforts in that area. One of the things that I've decided to do, and we decided as a committee to do, is form a water subcommittee. And we sent a letter to you guys to visit with that, because we will need a motion from you to okay that. I felt like that was necessary because we have water quality issues on our streams, rivers, and lakes throughout here. I mean, as a populated area, from time to time, we've actually done cleanups and things like that where we get old tires out and just have looked at it. Obviously, with what's going on the South Fork River right now with the possible removal of the dam down on the Armstrong Ford, which I frankly think is a good thing, we're going to need to look at that, at issues like that, and how they affect our water quality going forward. Now, I'm not going to talk very much about water quality as it goes to our drinking water. That's a little bit different animal altogether. But
We have the best tasting water in the state of North Carolina.
oh yes, we do. No question of that. I drink it every day. So I would not disagree with that at all, Jim. We're doing well on that. What I am talking about is as the water quality with where the South Fork comes in and where all our streams are concerned, we do want to begin to raise some awareness on that. I mean, people do use it. They boat on them. They fish on them, and just kids go out and play on them all the time. So we'd like to see what we can do about keeping that cleaned up. That's where we're going to raise some awareness of water conservation and cost. And now that will be towards the citizenry to go out and do what they can to conserve water, because again, that gets back to our direct costs, and that gets back to the energy of the whole thing. Every time we're running water, we're using energy, and that's getting to be a high cost situation. So we want to get it on everybody's mind that taxpayers of this town will be better off the more we push some water conservation and raise that awareness. Partner with other city stormwater coordinator on stream cleanups and events, just what I was talking about. We're going to be very adamant about keeping the streams clear and clean, and keeping, like I say, stuff that doesn't need to be in them. Like, again, I go back to tires and just junk that accumulates in these things around the riparian zones that occur out there, and being careful about how that is policed and cleaned up. I think it's very important. We've got a motion for you to go ahead and put that in our purview. So we'll wait for y'all to take a vote on that. Looking forward, again, the addition of our subcommittee, the water subcommittee. Maria here has been very good about researching the composting. And Maria, can I get you to say just a few things about that?
Once upon a time, nobody recycled. Most of you aren't old enough to remember those times, but everything went straight in the trash. And it was filling up our landfills and wasting valuable resources because you had to produce everything new. We're in we recycle now, and that's a good thing for the most part. They're, you know, plastic recycling, not so good, but there's paper, there's cardboard, there's cans and bottles, and those are all relatively successful and are keeping the landfills filling at a more reasonable rate. Composting, I believe, is probably the next thing past recycling. Right now, about 25% of what goes into our landfills is organic matter, food waste. Mostly, you know, things from your refrigerator, things for restaurants, leftover meals, and just pairings from, you know, food preparation, even if you're really diligent about eating all the food that you buy. 25%. Once that goes to the landfill, it then decomposes into and releases methane into the atmosphere, and methane is an extremely potent greenhouse gas. Probably about 14% of the methane emitted in the country is coming from landfills. And the worst of that is that if we captured that organic waste and put it into aerobic composting with commercial composters, 0 methane, and you end up with a usable product. So it's kind of like composting is a win-win-win all around. Anything is going to take money, it's going to take education, but what I'd like to do is start the way the town of Davidson did. They looked for a grant that could help support a pilot to see how it would work here. The pilot involved a number of collection centers where people would sign up and bring their compost there, because I think curbside would be, you know, way too expensive for an initial try. So I'll be looking at grants and seeing what we can come up with. There was one this spring and we tried to get it going, but we heard about it late and weren't able to get that prepared in time. So that's what I'll be looking for, is an opportunity to do that and get some help in getting that started. Yes?
A couple of questions, and this is more an educational process for me. You mentioned plastic recycling, not so good. I'm curious, if there are certain types of plastics that you don't encourage to recycle? And then the second question, just to follow up on that, you probably have some data on this. Of the total amount that we're recycling locally, statewide, nationally, whatever, however you want to qualify that, how much of that is actually getting recycled versus is a byproduct or waste, it's not getting repurposed into something else?
Well, I think, you know, the cardboard, the paper, the metal cans, all of those have a really pretty good recycle rate. Glass, to some extent, glass is a little bit harder because it takes such high temperatures. Once you break it down, to melt it again and reuse it. So glass is being recycled. I don't know the rates exactly. Plastic, I've seen estimates that only about 10% of the plastic that has ever gone into a recycling bin is actually recycled and formed into usable products.
And the rest is?
The rest is the landfill, except you spend manpower
Right.
sorting it out to get it to the landfill. So that's the thing with plastics. There's hope. There are new, now that people are paying attention, there are new processes, and, we'll keep an eye on those and see if there are any that we can talk to waste management about. But once it leaves us, we don't have a lot of control over what happens to that stuff. But the plastics, really, it's the bottles with necks that can be recycled. Any other kind of plastic, it's just wishful, and it's actually wasting money because it's going to end up in the landfill anyway.
So you suggest putting the bulk of the plastic just in the rollout, in the waste container versus recycling?
Except for
Save that manpower, but otherwise.
except for the bottles
Yeah.
that have necks and caps. And that's what's on, we have a flyer that's on our website that shows, what can and can't be,
Right.
what can be recycled. I keep it by my recycle bin
Let me ask you a quick follow-up question on composting. You're gonna seek grants, but I mean, do you have an idea of where you're gonna have this recycling plant or
We're
in how
not
much
building
area?
a plant, we
Well,
would work with a
or-
partner,
Yeah,
yes.
okay, so I mean, within this area, I guess, you want it locally?
Yeah, we would need to find sites locally where it would be appropriate. It's probably places where there are already trash dumpsters or something like that. To put the bins are about the size of the current recycling bins, and they, we'll do them with locks and combination locks so that only the people who sign up have the code, so that they know what they can put into that bin. But if you're working with a commercial composter, the types of food waste you can recycle go greatly up from what you can do in a backyard. They can accept meats, meat byproducts, things like that, that you really can't do in a backyard because you can't get enough heat generated to break those down. And we're fortunate, we have two potential partners to work with. One is the one that worked with Davidson, Queen City Compost in Charlotte, and they're primarily a hauler, but I think they have a farm out in Cabarrus County where they take the stuff and compost it. And then there's Earth Farms, which is a commercial composter licensed by the state of North Carolina. There are only 6, and they're up in Dallas, so not too far.
Thank you.
Jason, just when you were asking that, kind of jogged my memory, because this is more of a fun fact, but there's a textile mill, I guess they're still around up in Kings Mountain, called Patrick Yarns, that actually takes recycled plastics and manufactures them into mop heads. Fun fact. When you were talking about plastics, I just remember that. They were right down the street from somewhere up there, but just
I mean, these places like Walmart that encourage you to bring your plastic bags there and put them in these bags.
Plastic bags, I think they do. They do recycle the plastic bags, don't they, in there? Yeah. It's the other kinds, like
Yeah.
the clamshells
Yeah.
and styrofoam is really bad. I'm not saying that no plastic gets recycled, but we need to figure out ways to produce better materials. And that's not it.
And we'll get Andrew, we need to talk a little bit about our energy training that he's worked very diligently now.
Okay. Okay, thank you. So real quick on the composting, one other point was we're building up broader business case for composting because in essence, that organic matter, the 25% that would be diverting from landfills, we pay per pound for waste going to our landfills, that would be offset by the composting program, albeit supported with the grant as well. So there's a financial impact that we're going to be providing as well to help support that analysis and decision should we choose to move forward with it. Regarding upcoming look forwards, so as Ted had mentioned, upcoming trended data on energy, we have about 2 years of energy data to understand exactly how the city is using their current energy, when, where, why, and how. A lot of it, not to take away from the analysis, is going to be water treatment as a very big consumption of energy, so understanding how that gets trended out by month, so we can kind of see and have something tangible to understand with that. Same thing with recycling. We have some recycling data, but it's a little bit spotty in terms of how much data we do have. At that 10% usability, a lot of it is contaminated with food waste, which is why we can't use it. So truly understanding that so we can help guide our community forward as to how to recycle. I can quickly support the pollinator and reusable bag giveaways as we have more educational events with the community and as there's more community outreach. Our continued effort towards education for both pollinators, some of the giveaways we have and other things around energy and sustainability are going to continue to be the forefront for us in the community.
And just to back up what Andrew said, we are going to generate some data here on the energy usage, on composting, things of that nature, on recycling, so we know what we've got, and where our best bang for the buck's gonna be, and presenting that to you guys as a information to help make the decisions you need to make on. I will say that, with all of this, especially with energy, at some point, we're probably gonna have to get some professional, we're gonna recommend you get a professional come in and make some, a real critical analysis of this, and, see what you can come up with. We can trend it, and I've been in the business of doing that for a long time, but to really get a handle on what it's gonna take and what's gonna cost you to get there, you're gonna have to get, some sort of professional engineer like myself to come in and do something of that nature. I won't do it, obviously, that's a conflict of interest for me, but I do know people who do. We're also gonna be looking at our tree ordinance, with the situation that we've got with growth around here. We do want to preserve the canopy as much as possible, and so we'll be reevaluating that ordinance and giving you a recommendation on that. We've been doing sapling giveaways and, at our, events that we showed you a little earlier, and pollinator and reusable bag giveaways for beekeepers.
If I may,
And that's,
I have a question about the reevaluation of the tree ordinance. What particular are you looking at that I know there have been a couple of submissions to you all from developers who wanted relief from some aspect of it. But what particularly do you think needs to be looked at and perhaps modified?
I think we just gotta look at it in general right now. I can't give you an answer right now. I don't know. Probably, I would say, for one thing, notification would need to be a little bit stronger. That's one thing I would stress at this point. But there are other things that we'll look at in there as well. Again, we do want to preserve the canopies here as much as we can as part of the livability of our town. And so we'll be looking at it from that perspective. I can't say what any one thing we would look at other than the one I have looked at, where there is some reporting. We'll see.
Hey, Jim. So, in talking with Rob, the former chair of we're a volunteer board, and our expectation is to review the overall ordinance as a whole, to make sure it supports our community at large, to make sure that we're doing what's best for our community from a sustainability lens and the larger community as well. So, not so much intended to styrate the process or slow anything down as much as to make sure the intent of what it is to have a second set of eyes, to truly make sure that it feels good where we are going forward.
Well, yes, that's certainly good to always look at that. I know we're gonna do that with our comprehensive land use plan soon as well, and so you wanna make sure that when you pass something, it achieves what you intended when you passed it. And I know we tweaked it a little bit a couple of years ago, I think, already, when it turned out that we were being perhaps more cumbersome than needed to be in certain areas. So we appreciate that, you all's expertise.
I guess we need to get a motion to do our water subcommittee.
Well, I had a question about that. I'm happy to do it, but I don't know, from looking at the rules of procedure, which you all attached, it almost seems like the chair, if you look at section 4.2, the rules seem to indicate that the chairperson shall appoint any committees found necessary to investigate any matters before the board. So I'm not sure whether it's us that does that, or you all do it subject to our approval, or how that exactly works.
I think we do it subject to your approval.
Okay.
Sure, so to clarify, staff has asked them to come before you all to share the work that they would like to do in the upcoming year, make sure it has council buy-in and support. And then ultimately, while the board does have that discretion to appoint committees, because of the scope outlined in their rules of procedure, we wanted to make sure it was really clear as to all of the different areas for environmental sustainability that this board represented and also advised you on. And so specifically listed is not currently water in the rules of procedure.
Well, I don't think any of the subcommittees are listed in the rules of procedure.
Well, this board started as a tree board, and there are other topic areas that are specifically outlined in the rules of procedure. But the other one that we've noted is currently not in there that we felt like it might be important to also bring to your attention in case you had interest in revision or modification would be that this board oversees our Bee City USA program as well, and you don't currently see bees as a topic specifically listed within the rules of procedure. So if you all are comfortable, we can keep them as they are, but we did just want to make sure that for clarity and transparency, you know, the full scope of the topic areas that you wanted this board to have under their purview were outlined and clear for everyone.
Yeah, on section 221, where, Tim was talking about, it says, advise, deliberate, make recommendations to city council on tree and urban forestry related matters, recycling and energy use. So I think with the addition of water or BC USA or something generalized.
Or perhaps pollinators or pollination that would make it.
We just don't wanna get stung by the procedure.
So to speak.
So from our perspective, is that, I mean, we just give kind of, does that?
Well, I mean, I think-
Council meeting, I guess?
I mean, if you all wanted to, I mean, because I think there might be some other things that you all could amend as part of your rules. And if you wanted to undertake that and present us with like an amended rules of procedures. Now, I see what you all are saying. So like if you, because those are you've got your tree subcommittee, you've got your recycling subcommittee, you've got your energy use. So like if we sort of put that within your purview, then that would be, you know, your subcommittees. I think that would be fine, and then we could put it on our consent agenda at a future meeting and approve it. I think that would be the way, because I think there's some other things, like in terms of your membership, and I don't know if you wanted to talk about that, but in terms of like how the board's comprised, we've had the two student seats that have been open since me and Mark have been on council,
Well, that's
basically.
right, and I'm working to try to fill those. It's harder than you think.
Yeah.
But you're right about that, that's something we do need to work on.
Because if you know, when you have, then it also says an ETJ member, as far as I know, there's no ETJ member, but when you have 8 members, and it also says 5 members constitute a quorum, so that basically means you all, every one of you all, 5 that are on it now, have to come to every meeting, or there won't be a quorum, and everything you do doesn't count.
Yeah.
So like, I think that maybe we could make some changes there. We could also add the council liaison. We could put that into the rules of procedure as well, since we now have such an individual.
Well, that's pretty wide revamping of our charge. I'm not even doing it, obviously, we can't do that tonight, but, if you wanna do it that way, we're good to do it, and we'll just work with you on how we would, envision it and get towards something in that.
I just think, I mean, parks would be,
No, I agree with you.
I'm good with it.
all right.
Don said it would seem to make sense to eliminate positions that historically we can't fill, contribute to a quorum.
I'm not necessarily saying we need to eliminate them, but we need to do something,
Yeah, or make them non-voting.
Yeah.
That might be the thing.
because I don't want you all, I mean, you all, like Andrew said, you're a volunteer board, and sometimes people have other things to do, and, or conflicts, and I wouldn't want, well, we can't vote on anything tonight because we've only got 4 members and a quorum's 5. So, you know, something, even if it's just taking out the ETJ and having 6 regular members, that way, you know, if you get 5 out of 6, that could be a quorum. I'd also, there's some items in the rules that talk about posting things at City Hall. If you're going to amend the rules, I'd change that to City Works.
Right. Okay.
I
I'm good with that, yeah,
Yeah.
just give us a list of things like that that we would need to do, and we'll just go ahead and get working on that, and
Okay.
get it to the.
But overall, I mean, I think we all agree that, I think it would be good to have a water subcommittee.
Right.
Certainly, you know, you mentioned that you all could work with the Lake Wyland Marine
Yeah.
Commission, and they've been active
And
in
the
our,
keeper, obviously, so we
Yes.
can do that.
and they've been active in our, development applications that have been on or near the river, and, in recommending certain stormwater and erosion controls. So, that I think would be a good mission, and you'd have some people built in to work with. So I don't wanna, you know, bog things down, but procedurally, it just seemed like that was the best way to do it. And the city attorney would appear to concur with that, so.
Yeah, I would agree with you.
Anything else? Did you guys want a picture with the check?
Certainly would.
Is that negotiable?
Do you want the whole council?
I think that'd be great.
Okay.
Let you go there.
Or do we need to do, do you want us to do
Probably
it?
easier.
Together, that's a real right.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not every day somebody comes in here with a $600 check. So.
I know.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know. We should come more often.
We bring that up.
Sorry.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Take the check over here.
Thank you.
Yeah, don't lose that.
He's gonna need it, he's got turtle.
Don't worry, it's kind of
All right. Next we've got, I believe, a presentation from the Main Street Board on social districts.
Council, good to see everybody today. For those of you that don't know, got a new member here. My name is Joe Jordan. I am the vice chair of the DDA and the Main Street Advisory Board, and also spend a lot of time in the EV committee meetings. So I'm here today to follow up on a charge that we were given last year. So those of you will remember that we had our workshop in March of '22. And in that workshop, we had an initial discussion. There were a lot of people talking about social districts, what they were, what they weren't, but it was something that Belmont ultimately would want to implement or not. And that conversation turned into a charge to us to let's wait and see what happens. So it's been about a year and a half since that conversation was had, and here we are to report back. So we're doing our follow-up part, and starting this off, there are no wrong questions. So I'm
Oh,
here.
it's just like law school.
It is. If you want to stand up, we can do it that way too. It's more of an educational thing. We're not really going to say one way or another whether we think it's something that should be implemented. What we want to do is give you the information, what we've heard, report back, and let you ultimately make that decision as to what it would be. But as we're going through this, questions will probably pop up. Feel free to ask, and I'll do my best to answer those and give you a good idea of kind of what we're seeing go on in North Carolina. So most of you will remember in 2021, well, all this actually started during the pandemic when Governor Cooper signed an order that allowed restaurants to do takeout alcohol. So when you went in, you obviously couldn't stay in the restaurants at the time, so you would go in, you would take your order, and they had kind of devised a little set of circumstances where you could actually order an alcoholic drink together. So that started this, that was the initial spark that showed, okay, it's possible that alcohol can leave a facility that serves it, so what does that turn into? Well, in 2021, the initial draft of the social district law in North Carolina was passed. A lot of municipalities jumped on that, implemented it, and are still running with it. There were some ambiguity in exactly how it worked, and that was ultimately revised again in 22. So everything we're going to talk about today is going to be reflective of the new, or the House Bill 211 is what is the name of it, but the newer revision is actually what the law is today. So that's what we're going to be talking about. So as it is right now, it is something that we've seen other municipalities have adopted, and we'll kind of report back on what we've heard from those. But I think the best thing to do is really to start with what exactly the definition of a social district is. A lot of people have misconceptions of what a social district is. It is not turning Belmont into Savannah or into other areas where there is just an open container law. Social district is not an open container law in that regard. What a social district is, simply, the definition is a social district is defined as an area in which a person may consume alcoholic beverages sold by an ABC permittee located within a social district. social district may include both indoor and outdoor areas of a business within or contiguous to the defined area during the days or hours set by local government in creating the social district. The social district may include privately owned property, including permittees and non-permittee businesses and multi-tenant establishments, as well as public streets, crosswalks, parking areas, whether the streets or parking areas are closed to vehicle traffic. So that is the overall definition of what a social district is. Now, what we have heard and just discussing this is that the driving force behind this was really, to level the playing field between brick and mortars that were able to sell alcohol and those that were not. Now, what's the impact in a municipality and in businesses? That's a little harder to measure. But what we have seen is that, going out a little bit here, that 43 in North Carolina have adopted. So that's currently, as of today, there are 43 municipalities. Some very large, some very small. But what the exact impacts have been on each of these is a little more difficult to really tell you. But what we can tell you is that we went to the Main Street meeting, North Carolina Main Street meeting in Statesville earlier this year, March this year. And there was a specific presentation that was put together by some of these municipalities to come out and to educate those that were thinking about implementing a social district. So we were able to spend time with them, listen to them. We heard from the attorney that drafted the initial bill, the challenges that they had setting up, and also some of what we consider like the benefits of these social districts. And the main takeaway from everyone that spoke, and again, large, small, early adopters, late adopters, it was all kind of just a non-event for each of their municipalities. So you think about it, and you think, okay, people running around with alcoholic beverages, outside, and all these things. It really, for those municipalities, when they said they implemented it, it was happening, it just really hasn't had much fanfare. So it doesn't really seem to be drawing people into Belmont. You know, we want to come into Belmont because we can open a beer and walk outside. That's not really what the intent of the law is getting at. But what they have said is, again, with it being kind of a non-event, it's been both ways, right? So this has it impacted businesses in a positive way? Maybe. Have there been people falling out on the streets or a lot of police calls? No, it really was no uptick one way or another. Now, that's not to say there haven't been issues somewhere on this list. Sure there have, there always are. But from the ones that were there reporting, there were really no big issues to report to us. And that's what we wanted to convey to you. Requirements for a social district. So in the event council gets together and decides that this is something they want to pursue, there's very broad discretion for you to put this together. There are obviously a number of things that have to be looked at closely, but for the most part, the establishment of the social district is completely up to you as far as the geographic location of the social district and the time frame for the social district. In the geographical area, Cassie has done a lot of legwork on this. We'll show you a map here shortly. So this is the initial layout of what we foresee the social district looking like. Now it's important to remember a couple things. Within a social district, it is anyone in the shaded area, but it is also anyone contiguous to the shaded area. So there theoretically could be someone in the lighter area that could participate in the event you could get, it was contiguous actually touching. But this seems to make the most sense for a number of reasons. One is because it really captures all the ABC permittees in downtown that would be interested in joining a social district. The second reason is because it's pretty easy to define this area. The only time it gets a little wonky is when you get down to Catawba. I think as far as showing people where it exactly goes may be a challenge on that side. But for the most part, it's required that we post signs. So in the event someone could have a beverage and they could be walking out of the designated area here, there has to be a sign that specifies you're leaving the social district area. Now on the sign, there's a number of other things we'll go through that has to be on it, but it has to be clearly marked so that people that are in downtown walking in the social district or participating in it know when it is available and know where it's available, so that they don't get outside of that area.
Well, it seems like if this politics, I'd say that's a gerrymandered congressional district. You know, I guess I worry a little bit about something like that. How easy would it really be to figure out where it begins and ends and what's in it, and it's so oddly shaped.
Yeah, and that's a great point. And unfortunately, with the shape of our Main Street, it's not super easy to just kind of cookie cutter over it and say, okay, this would be the easiest way to do it. What we have seen in other municipalities, and really all the law requires, is that it's posted at the edge. Now, what does that mean? Does that mean somebody can get outside the social district? Absolutely. And that's where Chief Falls kind of comes in, and it is a concern that he has. That is also important is the enforcement of those and how important it is that we have a defined geographic area that's not confusing for enforcement purposes, but also for purposes of the public, and having a time frame that is, again, not confusing. So when we set the time frame for these things, one of the a large amount of feedback that we receive from people that have them is stick with kind of standard across the board time frame. Don't have it Monday from these hours to these hours, Tuesday from these hours to these. Kind of stick to it. That way the enforcement of it is a little bit easier on the resources of our officers when they're actually, again, enforcing it. But the map, obviously, for the purposes of what you need to know, is that this can change however you feel it is the best fit for downtown. This was a stab that we took at it. I think it makes pretty good sense the way it lays out. Obviously, there are some areas of concern that would need to be addressed. Stowe Park is going to be a big area of concern. I think when you look at that, it's obviously it's right in the middle of our downtown area. What do you do with that area?
Well, if it's contiguous, doesn't that mean it's in?
No, you have the discretion to exclude anything you want to exclude, even if it is within the area.
What about any group that reported that had something similar to this? Because that's my first concern, is that people are not necessarily going to pay attention since you're right there. And with all the families we have at Stowe Park, that's a major concern. But did any municipality talk about that?
They did. That's again, I appreciate that point. But yes, there was one specific that had much like ours, a public park in the middle of their downtown.
Mm-hmm.
And so if they were going to do a social district, it was going to carve all funny if they removed it. They actually included the park, but what they did is they reduced, or can't remember exactly how they did it, but they had tailored their hours so that the hours for a social district cup to be allowed in the park were different than when they saw most of their families with children and things down in the park. So there are options there. Again, getting back to the breadth of authority you have when you're putting this together, is you can really set it up however you want to set it up. So you could say, okay, we're going to accept this as it is, we're going to exclude Stowe Park. And there would be a sign at the entrance of Stowe Park that just says, you're leaving the social district.
You could also like carve out the playground too.
You could. So when you walk down the sidewalk down to Stowe Park, as you approach the playground, you could say you're leaving the social district. For purposes of our events that are now on the top of the field, it would make sense that would be excluded, if that's what the council ultimately decided to do. But so there are areas, obviously, nothing falls into a clear, easy, okay, we're just going to do a social district in all of downtown and it's going to make sense. There are a number of considerations that you as council are going to have to decide how comfortable you are with these things. But what if, go ahead, sir.
I was just gonna say, there's no way, I don't know if this fits into the definition of contiguous or not, it's probably not. That area between, say, Bottle Tree and, coming down Glenway to the right there between there and Primal, there's no way to really loop that into the district, is there?
You could essentially just come straight across like you're at the post office kind of down that side road that goes to Primal, and that whole block right there could be included. One thing to point out, the majority of these right here, these are residential, so residential.
Too, don't we? There's a daycare there?
Yeah, so those could be, they're obviously not be part of the social district for those purposes, but any property owner within the social district can also opt out of the social district. Now, for private residents, would make sense, but if you were a business, for example, a retail business that was within the social district area and you just didn't want people walking in with a social district cup, then you just post on your door that you opted out of that space. Now let's jump real quick, because there's a lot that goes into all these things, and I'm happy to chase any of them. I'm trying to, in a timely manner, give you the kind of 100-foot overview. But the signs, I don't know, actual signs itself.
Towards the front, I think.
Okay, well, there's an example, but there are a couple of different avenues that the information has to be given out in a social district. One is the signs, the boundary signs that we discussed, kind of posted, clearly posted at the outskirts of where the border of the social district is. The second type of sign is a sign that goes in a business. On the door probably would be the easiest thing. And again, there's broad discretion in how this works, but the way we have seen it happen is that if a business wants to opt out, not a selling business, so this is just like a retail business that would allow people to walk in. If they want to opt out of having alcohol in their store, they simply post a sign on the door that says, social district beverages are not allowed here, or no alcohol in the store, whatever it may be. If they are a store that is within the social district and they want to be included, they have a sign that opts them in. So there will be a sign on the door that says, yeah, you can come in here with your social district cup, whatever it may be during these hours. So that is for the residential side. The other side are other ABC permittees. And I think this is where it gets a little more complicated. So in practice, what would happen, for example, if Sammy's was in the footprint and they had their designated cup, which we'll talk a little bit about, there's a lot that goes into the cup, but if they had their cup and I bought a beer and I walked outside with that specific cup, I could walk around, I could go into anywhere within the social district, any store that allowed me to come in with that, I could go in. If I was leaving the social district, I would have to finish my beverage or just throw it away before I leave the social district. Then if I want to go into another permittee, ABC permittee, so if I want to go into Bottle Tree, for example, with my cup, first thing that has to happen is city council would have to approve that they are allowed to go into other permittees. Okay, so you have the discretion to say, if you buy a beverage that is in a social cup and is mobile and is moving through the social district area, you cannot go into another ABC permittee or another bar or restaurant with that cup. Or you can say, sure, that can happen in the event the other ABC permittee opts in to allow it to happen. There's like two levels here that has to happen, and that's because obviously there are a lot of laws around ABC. And what happens in your ABC establishment or in your restaurant that can jeopardize your ABC license as a permittee. So having someone come in with an open container, right now it's a no-no, right? You can't do that anymore. But in the event we would have a social district, someone theoretically could enter into another permittee's establishment with an open container. It would then be upon that restaurant or bar to say, nah, you can't come in here with one, or sure, yeah, you can, no problem. I think the feedback we've had from around town is most bars and restaurants would not want that to be the case. They would not want someone coming in from another location. And more is a liability thing than anything. They don't know how much has been consumed prior. So if they were to come in with a full cup of something, they don't know what it is. Harder for the bartenders to know where to gauge where that person is.
So, Joe, I got a couple of questions for you, because this is something that I've been trying to rattle. I've actually talked to a few of the restaurant owners in regards to this. So let's say I am at Sammy's, for example, and I've had a few drinks or so, and then I leave and I have my to-go cup. Sammy's at that point in time of me leaving their building does not know what I'm doing. They don't know if I'm going back to my car or maybe pouring some more beer in there or something else. Who's responsible because I know so Sammy's is going to be on that cup, right? And if I'm tripping and falling or if I'm acting foolish, I mean, is Sammy's responsible? Or what happens?
Yeah, good insight there. Well, and unfortunately, the social district law is silent to that. So if the social district law is silent to that, then it would just fall back to what would the normal laws of that be. And unfortunately, if that were to happen, so if you left Sammy's, you finished it, you go back to your car, you filled it back up with something else, and then ultimately we're in a car accident or got DUI or something like that, the line of logic would tell you that it would be on the bartender that last served.
Right.
Which is unfortunate because you obviously usurped their knowledge as far as gauging you and where you were when they sold you that drink.
and then went out and, now it does say, the law does say that people that are participating in the social district can't go and refill that container.
Right.
Okay, well, is it gonna happen?
Yeah,
They have.
I'm not.
But that is a concern, and I think that is a concern that the individual ABC permittees, restaurants and bars will have to figure out. They're either gonna have a level for comfort for it or they won't. And if they don't, then they're not gonna opt in and participate.
Has that been an issue in any of these cities? They bring that up? People refilling at their car with container?
It was not discussed. So if it was an issue, it was not brought up. We did specifically ask them for horror stories, tell us the things that went wrong. We want to know what went right, but we obviously want to know what went wrong as well. And that was not discussed. I don't recall that being discussed at all. I don't think it was. Now, again, when we think about alcohol-related incidents, do they happen? Yep, they happen. Anywhere alcohol is sold, it's going to happen. It's one of those things where you're weighing the risk against the reward. And so, what is the reward for a social district? Well, I think it gives our businesses more options. I'm a fan of options. I like people having options, being able to make their own decisions. So if that gives someone the option to not have to compete with somebody down the street that has, I mean, all of you have probably seen places that say, oh, we're doing, come in and shop, and we'll give you a mimosa, we'll give you some champagne to walk around. Yeah, legally, you can't do that. But they do it all the time, and it happens, it's just a thing that happens. And those people that want to abide by the law, the letter of the law, they're not going to do that. So does that put them in a disadvantageous place compared to the people that will? Maybe it does. This bill specifically was championed by the, the Merchants Association in North Carolina. They're the ones that really pushed it through. So there was enough thought on their side to think that there would be enough impact for this to make sense. I think when it first came out, it was really a novelty. It was one of those things where, oh, look, we can do this, we can do all these things. And it was kind of a neat idea. A lot of people have adopted it at this point, and it's, like I said, it's kind of been a non-issue or with little fanfare. The places that I have been that have had a social district, I've yet to participate in one. I don't know why, I just haven't. I guess, of course, I haven't, but I have not. And I really haven't seen any other people walk around with a social district cup either. And that's actually a great segue into the cup. Yes, sir.
Before you go to that, I'm assuming that if you leave one permittee and you go into another establishment, another ABC permittee, they're not going to serve you in that Sammy's cup if you're at the Dollar Tree.
That is correct. So that's a good point. Going to the cup, the cups have to have a number of identifying marks on them. It has to say, essentially has to have a seal that the council adopts for the social district. It has to have the name of the permittee that sold it. Oh, there you go, right there. It can't be made of glass. It has to say on it, drink responsibly, B21, and no less than 12 in font, and it can't hold more than 16 fluid ounces. Now, that doesn't mean, this is the minimum that it has to have to comply with the law as it's written. That's not to say that we can't do it differently, or we can't add things to it if you want to add things to it. I have heard some suggestions on your point, where if I leave my cup, or I leave with my cup and I drink it, and I go to my car and I refill it, things like that. I've heard some ideas on how to get around that, such as bartender like time stamping the last drink. It was when it left the store, 12:41 p.m. Okay, well, if the police roll up at 4 p.m. and find somebody sitting there with a cup full of something, well, it probably is not what was sold. Again, a little difficult to do, but I think there are some ways that some guardrails could be put on that. But again, the cup can't be refilled by any other permittee. You can take your Sandy's cup, leave, go back into Sandy's, and have it refilled. You can do that. However, if you're entering into another permittee and you finish it, you have to discard of it, and you have to get another one from whoever's establishment you're currently.
And so they're producing these cups subject to specifications that are established by the law and by us. Is that correct?
So that was going to be my question. So the bars or the restaurants are responsible for paying for and having those cups, I guess, to get out?
That's correct. They can be stickers that are stuck on the cups. They can be pre-printed cups. We've seen a lot of different variations. Some municipalities went with the aluminum cups to help with recycling. Some just going plastic cups. All we know is it can be glass. And
obviously for safety purposes. Now, I have heard of some different municipalities selling reusable cups, like something like $5, they had a cup that you could buy. Not exactly sure how it works, because again, the individual purveyor was supposed to be on each cup, so I'm not sure how that changes, but that was adopted in a couple of them that we talked about, because the question came up about trash. Is there cups everywhere, or all those things? Again, didn't really seem to be an issue, and I think it's because, again, it's one of those things where we think about it in practice, we're thinking all these people, droves of people doing these things, but it's just really not. And that's why there hasn't been much of an impact.
So if you were going to do, say, like a so-called bar crawl or something, you would have to get a different, I start at Sammy's, I get a cup, I drink it. Oh, it's time to go to Bottle Tree, all right. But I can't use the same, I gotta get another cup. No, I'm gonna go to the lodge. I can't use the Bottle Tree cup, I gotta get another one at the lodge, and so on and so forth. So I might need like 5 or 6 different cups before all is said and done.
It's kind of the object, Jim. It's kind of the object.
Yeah.
Yes. Now, here's another point, and this would, again, I believe, be up to your discretion. If you adopted a sticker scenario, it could just be put on over the sticker.
That's probably more realistic.
Yeah.
Well, one idea that I floated with the stickers was that we could actually produce them and then sell them to the businesses and use that as sort of a revenue generating thing. I don't think there's anything that technically prohibits that.
Nothing prohibits that. No, they could, I think there is an aspect of some revenue generation for the city. When you look at it that way, I think that is possible. But then it would essentially be up to the permittees or the participants to buy, the roll of stickers or whatever.
Right.
So
in effect, it's sort of like our own tax stamp.
More or less.
Well, sort of liability would possibly be a thing in there.
No, because we're not the ones pouring.
Yeah, I mean, it's like saying, well, the ABC store licensed somebody, and then the customer went in and drank, and so is ABC, well, there's other issues there, but, I mean, there's always gonna be, to your point, no matter what, whether you do a timestamp or what the law says, I mean, an attorney is gonna challenge, there's nothing to stop him from challenging,
Sure.
I mean, he might lose on summary judgment or something, but that doesn't mean he can't bring a lawsuit and force you to spend a lot of money defending it before you get dismissed.
So there, as you can see in going through this, there's the bare minimum that is required. And then, again, a lot of discretion for council to kind of finagle it the way that they see fit. Now, here's the, I don't know what you see on the side or the outside, but it is constantly amendable. So in the event it were to be implemented, then maybe a certain part of the map, let's just look at it here. A certain part of the map didn't make sense, they were having issues because it was confusing to go down to Catawba to get up to Prime or something like that. It can always be amended. Now, the initial map does have to be filed with ABC, North Carolina ABC. If you change the map, you do have to update that filing with North Carolina ABC. That's really the only requirements. You don't have to keep a log of who's participating with ABC or anything like that. So there is, again, a lot of discretion there.
Do we need to wait for them to sign off on the map before it's effective, or is it just sort of by the way?
That's a good question. That I don't know. The only thing that is specifically said is that it's required to be filed with that. We also, the city also has to set up the management of the social district and who's going to do that. The new law changed that so that a private entity can do it, a volunteer board of the city can do it. So really the management side of it, once it is established, can be offloaded to a committee or to an individual.
Would that be, this might open up a can of worms, could it be the ABC board?
I don't see why it couldn't.
Or could it be them, or could it be the businesses within the district themselves?
Good luck getting them together, but it could be.
I don't know, just throwing an idea.
Yeah, I think where it will make the most sense is where the bandwidth is.
for it to happen. And again, that would be your discretion to see where that is. And really the management of it is gonna be things like keeping the signs updated, making sure the signs are there, making sure that the stickers are going on the cups, or that the permittees have the stickers that they need. Just that essentially the thing is running like it's supposed to be run. I don't really foresee that it is gonna be a big, time commitment to make sure it's continuing. But once it's up and running, I think, with Cassidy has looked at a number of, design ideas and what that would look like. A lot of the work on the social district is front end heavy. It's gonna be getting together the signs, the stickers, the logos, the rules, getting it up on the city website. The rules and the map has to go on the city website. So a lot of different things have to happen, but once it's kind of released out into the world, so to speak, it should be pretty self-explanatory, unless there are issues that come up.
Have you talked to the police department
Yes,
about
so
this?
that is a great point, and Chief is here with us tonight. We had a great conversation the other day. We know that, we talked about his concerns, and I think they're all very valid concerns. And I think that it's something that we'll let you hear it straight from him, but that we want to be very cognizant of his issues or concerns with it, and how we can, in the event council decides to enact it, how we can enact it in a way that puts as little strain on our officer resources as possible.
Council, Mayor. Just a little clarification on something that was just talked about. I was going to kind of read from the House Bill 211 real quickly. It says a local government creating a social district is required to establish maintenance and management and maintenance plans for the social district, and post these plans along with draws, boundaries, and such. But what it talks about, a social district must be maintained in a manner that protects health and safety of the general public. And under House Bill 211, the government is now authorized to delegate the management and maintenance of social districts to a private entity such as downtown development organizations, a local chamber of commerce, or owner of a shopping center. And it talks about consumption hours and regulating that as far as ABC permits. Just to kind of clarify that question I was asked. Some of the concerns, I will tell you, the very beginning of the things went back before COVID when this was first brought up. I was very opposed to this because of the unknown that came with it. When House Bill 211 came into place, it kind of clarified a lot of different things, and it did clarify a lot of concerns that we had. We still do have concerns, and I'm not as opposed to it. I have been on vacation in the mountains in different places. Cramerton has it in place. I have all of the stuff from Cramerton where they enacted it, every single thing, the ordinances, everything for that. I've done all my research. In the very beginning of time when this first became a thing, was actually proposed by downtown development people or management people over downtowns for revitalization of cities who didn't have a lot of stuff going on downtown. We don't really have that issue. So at the time I was like, well, it's not something maybe we need to look at, but that's not my choice, that's up to y'all. So it kind of went away, and because of COVID. And so now here we are again, and a lot of things have been clarified, and I will say the only really concerns that I have are illegal drinking, such as what's been brought up about going out to your car, refilling your cups, and that sort of thing. The other thing is, I have 2 downtown officers, one during the day shift and then a second shift, but he kind of flexes out as he has other duties, as far as events and to kind of allocate the manpower downtown for all the events that we do have. One quick point I'll say is, you can basically put the social district stuff on hold for events, or you can run them concurrent with each other. I don't know if that was something I think we didn't touch on. But manpower allocation to ensure that we provide the best service from the police department to the patrons and the citizens is a concern of mine. But the thing about that is I don't really know what that looks like, because with events, every year, every month, we get more and more people in Belmont to attend the event. So can't really say how much manpower I'm gonna need to allocate or have to make this work, to manage it from our standpoint, to do the educational portion of it and enforce any kind of rules or violations. And like I told him in the meeting, I can't put somebody at the top of the stairs to go park all the time, 24/7, to maintain whether someone goes in the park or not. And I am concerned about the park for a variety of reasons, because and Mothers Against Drunk Driving is also against, that sort of thing because of underage drinking. And the other thing is, the families that are in the park. Normally, when we have events here in the city, we have a lot of officers, 8 to 10 officers who work all those events, who are able to kind of manage and maintain, you know, some of the things that we allow the drinking in the park now. And with this, I won't have that all the time. I won't have that allocation of manpower for that if this is proposed. And so, like I said, I don't really know what that looks like and what it would take to actually, on our side, make sure the safety of the public is paramount, and make sure that that's done properly. The times is a concern, and me and Cassidy talked at a meeting or two back about the times, and I think we kind of hashed out what I felt was good times based on what I currently have as far as manpower. But I think that's for a later discussion. Other cities have not made any, other cities have had kind of like a handoff approach. There's some other municipalities who are very opposed to it and have went to the city council and said, you know, we're not for this, and they, you know, they have a kind of a hands-off approach to it. And I would think we as Belmont need a hands-off approach to it. I think it's something that if we're going to enact it, I think we need to make sure we're doing it from my standpoint, from a safety standpoint, that I do everything I can to make sure that everyone's safe, especially in the sense that people are going to leave from these places drinking and get in vehicles and leave. And a lot of that legality and liability is going to fall back on some of the business owners, like what was talked about earlier, as far as if you go in one place and get alcohol, go out to your car, and then go into another place, that person may or may not allow you to bring one cup in from one place or another. It's not really the issue. It's who's going to be liable for overall if you've been in like 6 businesses. And some of the businesses have they're not going to do it because of that. And then a lot of that's because there is an unknown that comes along with that, because there's no cases yet. There's not a lot of hard data as far as from a law enforcement standpoint on whether or not there's actually issues or not at this point, because it has been enacted for quite some time in some places, lower than others. But like I was talking to Brad Adams in Cramerton, the chief, he said, I don't really know because we've only had it like 3 weeks. So there's no real big change yet, but long term, overall, you know, you just have to look at it long term, what's the change is going to be, and can, from a police standpoint, am I going to be able to manage it and do it properly for safety? That was my main concern. I think it's a good thing. I think it's going to definitely bring a lot of business into Belmont. It's going to definitely heighten business, but that's my concerns. If y'all have any questions or any clarity, let me know.
Hey Chief, quick one for you. Down East Catawba, that, and, you know, Joe kind of brought this up too. We don't want to exclude any businesses, and I know Primal Brewery's back there, but that just kind of shoots out at me as a concern walking down Catawba Street to try to then go down that gravel road to get to Primal Brewing right there. I mean, from a map perspective outside of Stowe Park, do you see anything kind of how the geography is that kind of screams out at you?
When you guys were talking about it earlier from the aspect of the residential areas and the businesses that are right in there, more commercial, like you have daycare right there, that was a concern. You have those houses that are in line right there. But I think the main thing was to try to not exclude anyone who's a current ABC permittee. I think that was the biggest thing. The area that you're talking about, that gravel road, I'm not really sure if that's who that's owned by as far as being able to actually include that. If it's the right of way for Duke Power or whoever owns it, I don't know that information. I would say that was something that would need clarity before it was adopted. But it's not really a big concern. I think it was mainly to encompass Primal Brewery, but also for the meal, the Chronicle. I mean, I didn't know what future. I mean, we talked about different things that might take place in the future, and we didn't want to exclude anyone.
Yes, that is the shape is weird, but you don't want to go picking winners and losers either by excluding people.
And actually, one of the
Well, I just want to
businesses,
make sure the safety is the number one
Well, if you
priority.
included that driveway by the post office, I mean, that would be, to me, the most natural connection there. I mean, unless you're going to
Yeah.
the Chronicle.
That
but-
just straight away there, you mean?
Yeah.
That's what I was thinking, but I saw it was not included in the current
Yeah,
map.
but I don't think there's any reason we couldn't.
you could, I mean, you could possibly do the south side sidewalk area leading from the downtown area near Glenway to the Chronicle, and then do exactly what you're talking about, up Glenway, extend it north into that, back in there.
Right.
That would
Yeah, just have like
definitely be a
a
possibility.
donut hole basically with those.
Because again, the only other thing that I have major concern is crosswalks and stuff like that. Something that is clearly defined for someone to cross, because particularly right there on Catawba Street, if you're just going straight to the left, going down towards Primal, you're gonna have to get over to the right, because the sidewalk doesn't go all the way over there.
Right.
You've got like Ryan Tripp's business. So at what point do you cross over? So if I have a beer and there's a group of us and just multiple people start crossing, you get where I'm saying? If
Right,
we're just going
exactly. And
That's my safety concern I'm kind of concerned about.
that's the good thing about this, is this kind of like just an overview of it, and to let you know what the options are, and if it is something you're interested in, you know, we could maybe do another workshop and figure out some of the, you know, kind of narrow down all that.
Hey, I apologize, I'm going to represent the city at the Parks and Rec Board for the county, and I've not been in several months because of our budget, so I'm juggling a lot of things today, but I appreciate the information.
I'm sure you don't have any data on this, but what's your gut tell you about, you touched on underage drinking. You know, if somebody goes into an establishment and they've got a cup that's got an official sticker on it, they walk out with a full drink, and then they go and hand it off to their nephew in the parking lot, you know, who's 17, but he's got an official cup. I mean, just from what you know about the demographics here in town, and I was one of those at one point, but I'm just curious if you see that as a big risk.
I don't, I wouldn't say it's a huge risk, but it is definitely a concern, for taking the drinks into the park when I don't have as much manpower. But, and the other side of that I really touch on is this going to be something that where families who bring their kids to the park and the playground area, I know you guys said something about, excluding the playground, but is people who bring their kids to the park during certain times, and that's something you may want to look at. If people who are opposed to drinking in general, like Mothers Against Drunk Drivers, for numerous reasons, if you're going to take your kids to the park, are you going to push away some of the people who would use the park to have a social district? And that's something I think you have to find that happy medium. And that's one of the reasons I was really opposed to the park situation, other than at events where I have more allocation of manpower. But I don't think it's a huge risk factor. I don't think it's a huge risk factor for us. I just want to make sure if we do enact this, that I have the resources that I can thoroughly make sure that I manage it, because like other places, we're kind of in a bubble, and on our bubble stays nice and pretty, and I don't want anything to happen. So I want to make sure that I do the very best job that I can to ensure the safety aspect of it, and whatever that looks like. And that's the part that I really don't know, because I don't know how many people are going to show up, and every year the crowds get bigger at our events, so I don't know. I don't have the answer to that.
So your concern is staffing. As events grow, you're gonna require more manpower to enforce not just the area, but the regulations. Okay, which means more cost, more overtime, possibly more police officers. I guess my question is, how do we offset that? I mean, I don't know that stickers are enough revenue stream to cover that. I mean, are there any other options for revenue here? Because if we enact this and we're basically gonna increase our budget, your overtime and your officers, the more people that pour into these events. I mean, I'm not against it conceptually, but I've got to wrap my mind around how do we offset those costs with those additional patrols and officers.
I think it's something that we, in time, will just tell, and then as the need arises, I can report back to you on what my findings are, what I'm seeing. If there is issues, and I for sure need more manpower, I'm going to ask for it, you know. And if I don't, I don't. And if we're able to manage with what we have, that's what we'll do. We'll do that for
I
sure.
know it's relatively new, but in your discussions with these other communities, did they have similar stories that their police force, they needed additional officers, and how they dealt with that?
So the municipalities that discussed it at this specific meeting did not say that they needed any increases. We asked them if there were any issues, if they had any need for an increase, and they said they did not. But I would caution you against making a judgment based on what other municipalities are doing when it comes to that.
What's more anecdotal?
Yes, yeah, and maybe we just didn't ask the right question.
Yeah.
That always, I don't want to lean too heavily on that, because it was a great meeting. There was a lot of good information So it would definitely be something that I would err on the side of safety with the chief here, that if it makes more sense to start out, maybe prepared for more, then maybe pare down and make sense, versus kind of going into it, assuming that other municipalities didn't have issues that we won't.
Are there any like potentials for grants through the Main Street program for allowing like a social district that can be allocated to the police department by any means, or?
That is a great question. I don't know the answer to it. I know that Main Street program has gotten some new tools when it comes to grants, and there may be, and so that we can definitely look into if there's anything that can offset, grants that could offset costs of that.
But I do think it's not like we need to distinguish between events and the social district, because, you know, events like Red, White, Belmont or Friday Night Live, you know, that's one thing, and obviously we do need to increase police presence, but, you know, this is sort of, you know, whatever the hours are, there's no event, it just sort of happens. And so, now I'm not saying that might not necessarily mean that there's gonna be more people out and about that would require an increased presence, but I don't think that there's necessarily going to be events, it's just gonna be that there might be more, you know, some people, we don't know how many, maybe it turns out there are more, and we do need enforcement. I take it, I think, Chief, you mentioned that Cramerton just established theirs, so there's no real lessons to be learned there yet, I guess, if they just established theirs a few weeks ago.
Yeah, Chief Adams said that his downtown's kind of small, but they do have that green grassy area right across from where the businesses are. And so it's kind of easy for them to kind of contain everything. Everything's kind of contained versus in some cities, ours is a little bigger, the proposed part, but in some cities, it's a whole lot bigger than this.
What, Joe, what are the local restaurants, if you've had any discussions like in the EV committee, how do the local restaurants or the retailers who would potentially allow people with these wonderful cups to come into their facility?
I went through, initially, when we first discussed this in '22, I went around and spoke with the majority of the restaurants and the current business owners at the time to get their feedback on whether it was something they would support or not. And I think I talked to 7. And out of the 7, there was only one that had concerns about it. And it was because they were under a temporary ABC permit. And they were afraid if any other alcohol came in, it would jeopardize their permit. And there was no real way to prevent somebody from walking in with it. Now, the law was clarified since then that they can opt out and not allow other alcohol in to their location. So I think that would probably alleviate their concerns. But of the restaurants I discussed, I received good feedback that most of them would participate. As far as the businesses, the retail side, I have not discussed with any retail owners. But have you got any feedback?
We've been setting up.
Microphone for everyone watching at home.
As staff, we set up meetings with a grouping of our retailers quarterly, and we have been discussing this concept with them, and all of them that were at those meetings were in favor of allowing folks into their businesses, you know, in the spirit of the social district.
Now, what's this, it's just beer, right? Or is it like beer and wine?
The same thing, beer, wine, alcohol, mixed drinks.
It can be liquor drinks as well?
Yes.
Now, okay, do we have the ability to council, again, this is just my opinion, to regulate that a step further? Let's say we don't want a bunch of liquor drinks going around downtown. Can we just say it's beer and wine, or?
Again, the law does not specify that you can't. So, and again, with just the broad authority that it is given to local councils, I would assume you can tailor it to anything you want.
I will just say this to council, this is just my 2 cents, whatever the majority decides. I do have a concern with liquor drinks around downtown. I mean, again, it's a higher content in regards to what you're drinking in a cup as opposed to just having a beer in hand, where I feel like by the time you finish that beer and go to your, wherever you're going, your next destination to get another one, maybe there's a little bit more of a cooling down period per se, as opposed to having a liquor drink downtown, but that's just my concern. The only thing I was gonna say, and then I'll just be quiet in regards to this, is I would be kind of interested in this, but I would be curious to see a phased approach, just from my perspective. Maybe you target a couple of days, as opposed to saying every day. And then even limiting the time of the scope from 12 PM to 10 PM, limiting that further, maybe off of recommendation of what we see from the parks and things like that. I do also want to state though, in talking to citizens, because I've been doing a lot of straw polls, because me personally, I've wrestled with this and figuring out what would be the right thing to do. My opinion would be to avoid Stowe Park in its entirety because of what that place, I mean, every time I go by there, it's filled with kids playing and running. And particularly for me and some of the parents I haven't talked to, it wouldn't be appropriate and we could be deterring them from enjoying a park that they pay for via taxes.
Well, what we could do is, I mean, the railroad kind of forms kind of a natural boundary there. You could just like cut out that whole bottom section, if we wanted to kind of keep it relatively simple at first anyway, because it sounds like most of the concerns are around the park and events and everything else, and all that happens south of the tracks. So we could start out with almost like a pilot program, I suppose, north of the tracks, which is going to capture probably 90% of the ABC permittees downtown anyway, and kind of see how that goes from like a behavior perspective, staffing perspective, usage, and all of that.
But do we, and this is what Joe and Chief were talking about, do we then directly target or potentially now limit businesses to, let's say, a Sammy's or the Old Stone and the grill that they just opened up back there?
If I can put my 2 cents in on that, my only concern with that would be the businesses that were excluded, because they're gonna see this as a big boom for the ones that are in there, whether it is or not. They're gonna see this as a kind of a special thing they're able to offer, and the others are not. And I think if that, I might try to limit it in other ways. I don't really know what that is at this point.
Yeah, I'm
But
just
in other ways, that would include
Yeah.
everyone, but would still get you that control. And one thing to keep in mind, again, I don't press this point, but just to do it again, it is a very fluid thing. So if you decide you want to amend it, it literally is just a vote of council to amend it. So that's all it takes. It doesn't have to go and be some big fanfare because you decided to limit hours, to change the hours, or to change the exact. The only thing that takes an extra step outside of a vote of council is if you change the geographic location, it has to be updated with ABC.
In terms of increasing foot traffic, assuming that's one of the obviously primary drivers here, how many of these businesses that we're talking about actually allow food and drink inside their businesses already? I'm thinking about like the clothing boutiques and, Catawba Outfitters and those kinds of, do they allow food and drink in there now? And are they really gonna be disadvantaged if, that's the only.
Good question. It's been a long time since I've seen a sign on the door that says no food and beverages allowed. I'm trying to think, how long has it been since I've seen that? I do know that I see people all the time in every retail shop in downtown with a purpose of some degree. I don't ask what's in it.
That's gonna be my question.
And it's, I guess maybe we already have a social district.
Just don't know.
But, again, I don't know, and my guess would be that, as a small business owner myself, in downtown, that anything that I feel like would give me an advantage, I'm probably gonna try it. And maybe I try it for a month and I realize I've got people spilling beer everywhere, maybe it becomes a problem and I decide to just put a sticker on the door that says no more. But I think most of our downtown, just from talking with them, as Cassidy has done, that they are pretty open to the idea of just having another option that might help them business-wise.
Andrew, I have a question. So for special events, it's housed at the upper field, and there's alcohol that's sold by a nonprofit in that area. If there was an event like in the street on Main Street now, and alcohol sold by a nonprofit, can the social district be enacted at that point and have the social district and an event taking place where you can sell alcohol?
They can live together.
Okay.
The two things can live together. Now, one thing to point out here is Sammy's would not be able to put a booth outside on the street and sell beer under just the authority of the social district. They would not be able to do that. The only permittees in the social district are only allowed to sell with whatever their license allows them to sell. So for example, as a permittee, I can only sell in my footprint of my building. I can't sell outside. Now you can get an off-premises license that allows you to sell out front or wherever you are. And those, if those specific permittees, if they had that, they could, but I don't know of any in downtown that have that. So that wouldn't open up, for example, the people that are participating, they wouldn't be able to go out in the event we had Friday Night Live in downtown on Main Street again. They couldn't go out there and sell their social district beers. So we would still, the city would still have to get all the permits to do the beer like they do now.
But you might be able to, because I know when we approved the ordinances, here's the defined area in which you can have alcohol. I mean, is that maybe, if they're working simultaneously, then you're not restricted like the Airline Street and, you know, you could take it north of the tracks or something.
The only thing I'm not certain on, and I can certainly ask, is if the city is selling beer, for example, on the upper field, if they, and because it's outside the social district area technically, if they would be able to give like a social district cup, that you could leave the designated permit.
Well, I certainly don't think like we'd want to do that for the upper field. I mean, there are reasons why, various reasons why, you know, you probably just, but I was thinking more like Miles said, on the street, on Main Street.
Well, if you excluded the park from the district, I mean, that almost creates like a demilitarized zone between the upper field and the district. So, you know, that would be a way to kind of naturally create some segregation there.
So maybe to Chief, if we're having an event, like Red, White, and Blue or something like that, right, and we're selling alcohol up on the field, and then the social district is enacted as well, I mean, from your perspective of our current coverage, would you prefer us just to not have a social district during that night? Or does it even really matter? You know what I mean?
Doesn't really matter. Because, you know, we try to keep it separate where business owners are north of the tracks. Their alcoholic beverages stay north of the tracks and south the same. We made so many people angry with that I told them, we're not looking for red solo cups at this point, okay? Like, it's not that huge of a concern, you understand, because we have more things to deal with at the events for safety stuff. But, so I don't think it's an issue as far as like whether it travels north or south or any of that.
Okay.
And also, I have Tyler Busby here, who was the ABC officer, who is very up on all the laws, and if y'all have any law questions or anything. And then Chad Rudney, who is now the ABC officer, who just got through going to training and some other stuff. If y'all have any questions for them, they can clarify a lot of the law questions in ABC 18B violations.
Or do you guys have any additional thoughts or opinions that you guys would like to share as well? I mean, again, I think this is all uncharted territory, so as much information.
Well, it is. My concern with the map within itself is including the parking areas, especially behind former City Hall. I think it encourages open containers within vehicles that people can carry them to their cars. They're going to get in their cars with open containers within their car, which is illegal, period. Another concern I have is the sidewalk congestion. As it is, most of the restaurants downtown already have some form of table or sitting outside. Now you want to add to that with people standing around the outside on the sidewalks drinking alcohol. So those for me are concerns, because at that point, if it's heavily congested, you don't have people moving from business to business. You just have people standing around on the sidewalks. Now you're pushing those pedestrians who are going to be walking out into the street area to get around. So those are concerns I have. And then, you know, the chief touched on manpower. That's not my priority. But if we're looking at liability issues, we do look at liability with the those who serve the alcohol. Eventually, we'll be coming back to them to determine how much alcohol was served if someone is involved in an accident or something like that. What liabilities would the city hold? We don't know. But could the city open themselves up to a lawsuit if it is approved, and then, but there's not fire down there to enforce the boundaries of those people who are out in the social district, doing that. So those are the concerns I have.
Good afternoon, everyone. So when I worked with Cassie a little bit on meeting with some of these patrons as well and talking to the business owners and disclosing what their opinion would be based on the very little information that we've got tonight as well. So pretty much the same kind of spiel that we pitched to them as well, involving the updated House bill laws that have passed. There was 4 businesses that I talked to that were not on board with it whatsoever. Those being bars and restaurants as well. So they didn't want anything to do with it because they were nervous about what could happen with somebody else bringing alcohol into their establishment. So it's also like, yes, if you go bar hopping like some people do in Belmont now, if they leave one restaurant, they eat dinner, and they go somewhere else and have a drink, and they go for like everywhere it does. But their concerns were them bringing a cup in there, and then at that point, they're going to discard that cup, and they're going to continue to drink in there. Where does that liability fall for them specifically, was their concern. If they're now in that establishment, is it going to be, Honeycomb that's going to be liable, or is it going to be Sammy's where they left their first drink? Where does that fall at? And that was a question I had to explain to them. It's hard to find that exact line where do I find that they were impaired at? Did I find that they were impaired then, or?
Well, what's going to, the lawyer for whoever is injured is going to sue them all.
Exactly. Exactly. And so whenever we were talking to these people as well, they brought up, 2 different places brought up, well, is there going to be cameras installed downtown Belmont for the investigation perspective? For us to be able to backtrack and say, hey, where was this guy coming from? Was he leaving Sammy's or the Old Stone, and then he walked up the street and he went here, did he look impaired here? Again, these are questions I didn't have the answers to at the time, but these are the concerns that these business owners had with me when I was talking to them. I agree with Chad when he's talking about the PDA areas being included. I mean, there's several PDAs back behind these areas that are parking areas that are, is that the area that we're trying to isolate for the social district, or is that going to eliminate part of the perspective that we have of people concerned about going to fill up their cups? If they take their social district cup into the PDA, at that point they would have already left the social district. That was one of the concerns I had as well. I'm kind of neutral on both sides of it. I'm not for it, against it. I kind of just play the fun line with it, on our perspective. But mainly my concerns that I have.
As the ABC officer, we're not here to, we tell the businesses that. We're not here to punish. We're here to educate and make sure everybody's on board, that they're within what they're supposed to be doing so that they can stay in business and succeed. And that's what, obviously, we want for the businesses, in Belmont, to be in compliance with what they need to do. If they're not, we let them know, and for the most part, they'll fix it. It's really nothing major, but we're not here to, again, to punish them. It's just, we do our inspections to make sure they're in compliance, so that they can stay in business and keep their permits. So.
Joe, we talked a lot about the concerns. Going back to the benefits, you were sort of, you said it's sort of like, well, it's sort of been, it just happened, there wasn't a big, uproar or anything, it was just sort of been a non-event. So, are we really sure that there are these tangible benefits that we can point to? It's sort of like when, a stadium, and people always say, well, if you build a new stadium downtown, there's going to be all these benefits, but then, a lot of the studies that are subsequently done make it hard to actually quantify or determine if there is a benefit caused by the stadium when you weigh it against all the costs and everything. So, we've heard a lot of concerns. What are the benefits? Like, why would you say this might tip in favor of doing it? Because certainly 43 municipalities so far have found that there are more benefits to costs, and they've gone forward and initiated one.
I think for a lot of those municipalities, and maybe even for us, is kind of like call it a leap of faith kind of thing. That if we enact it, good things are going to happen as far as getting more foot traffic on the streets, having people mill around, staying around longer, shopping, and supporting those retail businesses. what I will tell you is that I don't know, and that there is no quantifiable information that I've seen that has said, since we implemented our social district, retail sales in downtown are up 10%, or 3%, or 15%, or whatever it may be. I haven't seen that. The benefits that I have that we've discussed in the meeting was that, if nothing else, that it gave people more options. It gave restaurants more options to, for example, if there were a small waiting area, a lot of people waiting as opposed to crowding the bar to wait for seats, they're able to take their beverage and stand outside. With a lot of restaurants going to that kind of text when your table's ready scenario, you go in, personally, I go in and the lodge and I give my phone number and I go back out the door, that's all I with my family, because I know it's gonna be 30 minutes or so. And it allows that restaurant to sell that group, if they are so inclined, to buy a beer and to walk out and walk around as opposed to standing around in there. So that's, as far as restaurants go, I think that's the upside. And that it's almost like a novelty that you can sell a cup together. On the retail side, that's a harder question. What I will tell you is that I would find it very odd that there weren't benefits. That there weren't benefits worth pursuing, because we've had so many municipalities adopt it. And as of the meeting in March, I don't know if this is the case, but as of the meeting in March, there were no known municipalities that had revoked it. So of the ones that had adopted one, nobody had gone back and removed it. So to me, reading between the lines, which I can do staying on this side, that tells me that it probably, a lot of the concerns that, and very valid concerns and things that need to be discussed and taken into consideration when these types of decisions are made, that those concerns, if appropriately approached, were at least mitigated by the law that's there, and enough to keep it and enough of a benefit to keep it in their municipalities. So as much as I wish I could tell you black and white, here it is, unfortunately that's not something I can do. Any questions on any of that? I know it's, there's a lot of moving parts. I think, again, even though we're 2 years into it roughly, it's still a relatively new concept. And personally, when I think, and again, let me be very clear that I have a young family, I have a business in Belmont, I live in downtown, I have a young family that's on the streets in the park all the time. So I think they're all very valid concerns. And as a business person, I'm drawn to the aspect of what options could it open up. So I see that side of it as well. And so as a property owner, business owner, I'm not really here to tell you one way or another. I want to give you the information so that we can lean on your discretion as to what you think is best for Belmont. As the vice chair of the DDA and the Main Street Advisory Board, we've had a lot of good discussions on it, and we want to see the possibilities that could be beneficial for the businesses and for downtown. So we're not really in a position to tell you, we're supporting this, we want you to do this. What we would tell you is that we feel like in the event it was adopted, Belmont's ready for it. I think we're in a position where it would work well with our layout and what we currently have in downtown, but ultimately the implementation of it and the drafting of it and the guide rails, so to speak, for it are solely in your discretion. Oh, and one other point I meant to make that somebody brought up there. The best horror story that I heard, and there were only a few, but the best one I heard was from a municipality that adopted very quickly. So essentially what they said is they had a very pro city council that was for it, wanted to adopt it early on to be one of the early adopters. And they did, and they voted it, and it was unanimous, and they implemented it. And they had more issues from not holding a public comment on it than they did any issues that came out of the city, or the social district. So the advice that was given to us is, in the event of something you want to implement, just make sure you have a public comment section. There's some education of the public for it, so they're able to come in and to be heard and to make their concerns valid before any adoption takes place.
It might take an entire afternoon.
It probably will.
So if council so choose to move forward with this, like, what is the timeline? You're talking about like an ordinance to be passed, then we have to create signs, then we have to get with the business owners, and they would or the stickers, and so we're looking at like, how many months in advance? If they wanted us to move forward tonight, like, what is that timeline?
Well, the upside is with the new clarified law, you can delegate all of that. So the only thing that city council has to do is essentially establish it, vote on it and pass it, and then you can delegate the creation of the stickers, the cups, as long as they're within the ordinance, that can be offloaded to and really whoever you choose to do it, but I would suggest some city committee that has, again, the bandwidth to do it. But my guess would be probably, if it was passed today, you're probably looking at least 2 months to get everything up and running, would be my guess. Just from having to have the signs printed and the stickers printed and everything else that comes along with it. And let me address just one concern about the parking lots, which is something that we struggle with, the best way to handle that. And I don't know that there is a best way to handle that. Our challenges with it became the need for posting it in conspicuous areas. So if, as like this block, for example, if you were to, like Sammy's here, doesn't have a cup on the back. And so Sammy's would have to have a sticker on the back door that says, no alcohol beyond this point. Right? Back here, you have the backside of the vehicle, all this right here is parking. And so the question became, where do the signs go? Do you have to have signs on every corner? Does there have to, if the social district kind of carves out an area, do there have to be signs in those corners? And that became a kind of a hole that we fell into, that the law itself does not really clarify how often or where exactly the signage has to be posted. So that was the best attempt in order to kind of split the difference, so to speak. Any other questions?
I think for me, maybe we can do it simultaneously. I'd be interested to see what the upfront cost would be, because obviously signs, I think they can be a little pricey in today's market, so, and how many of them would we need? So I don't know if there's been an analysis done on that, but I'd be interested to see what the upfront total cost would be to the city to get this as you guys have it proposed. I also agree the parking lots, again, that's what prompted my question, right? I'm looking at the map and I see a lot of parking lots in here, so I'm like, okay, well, I'm in the district, open up that car door, boom, 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 and then I'm out walking, and if no one saw me, then, I mean, that's my concern, and the liability to the restaurant owners too, because we don't want to burden them with anything additional, so that's just my concern.
I don't disagree with those concerns. And I agree about Stowe Park, it should be off limits.
Well, I guess my question would be like, where do we want to go from here then? Obviously, I don't think we're going to decide this today, but I mean, just in terms of like, what general direction do we want to give? And
For me, I think we've spent a lot of time talking about the concerns and the liabilities, especially that big concern to me. The park, I would not be in favor of. I'm concerned about the police assets and the potential strain there, because it is an unknown. For me, I think we don't have enough data about the benefits. I mean, if we're doing a cost-benefit analysis on this, there's a lot of costs and liabilities over here, but I'm not hearing much data yet, and it's not your fault, it's just not there. I mean, I like the concept, but what sort of positive attributes is it gonna bring to our businesses, to our community, versus what we're gonna have to explain about the concerns and liabilities?
Would it be possible or even be prudent to have a roundtable with Gastonia? I think Gastonia's had it in place closer to the inception of this, isn't it?
They have, and as Chief let us know, that their approach is different than Belmont's approach would be. That they kind of just set it up and they're just letting it be, and not really, they've said that they're not going to give any more police manpower, they're just, is that correct? They're just going to kind of let it do its thing.
laissez-faire
So,
approach.
yeah, so.
You know, that might be a good benchmark though, right? So if you're looking at maybe the lowest of managed, and what are the negative attributes to that, and we then can kind of build our plan ground up, if that makes sense from it. Phil has a few words.
Phil's appeared at the podium.
Yeah,
I struck a nerve somewhere, right?
No. You previously asked the question
question about, you know, any state funding or grants. To date, there's none for social districts. A lot of the conversation tonight reminds me of a conversation that was held approximately 4 years ago when we first started having a conversation about selling beer at Garibaldi Festival. And so I'm sitting there listening. And so when we allowed that, and I remember a former council member drinking a beer, pushing his kid in a stroller in Stowe Park, saying, God, this is the best thing I ever did. Because it's about being social. And so what some of the other downtown directors, there have been, you know, not much negative said, but the only real positive that's really talked about is some districts that really allow for the social aspect. We had, I can't remember which community it was, talked about, they had little pocket parks, and so they had restaurants were allowed to, you know, have people go in, grab a drink, and then go sit down. And they've seen a lot of couples bringing games and sitting outside. So it's truly a social aspect. And so I think it really depends on the makeup of the district as far as really trying to find out what those true benefits are for, you know, allowing. Gastonia, about a couple of months ago, over the last 2 years, we've been a lot of training, a lot of presentations. So Gastonia and the GBA held another training. And so several of us, Jennifer, Church, and Cassidy, and I went to Gastonia to go through that presentation. They brought in the downtown director from Hickory, and they were one of the ones that's early on that enacted the social district. And so when y'all were talking about trying to go somewhere, bring someone in, I think the person from Hickory would probably be an ideal candidate to bring in to really talk through, you know, the pros and the cons.
How long have they had theirs, you know?
I think they were probably, one of the first who enacted their district. And but he gave a great presentation to the large group that were in Gastonia a couple months ago. So, I mean, if you wanted to, we could bring him in and, you know, to do a similar presentation that he gave in Gastonia and talk about more. So, you know, I appreciate your comment. What are the benefits? And so, again, looking at the district, you know, can we provide those benefits to make it beneficial for our businesses?
Perhaps that's what we should do, because I feel like, yes, I mean, even now, it's still relatively new, so there isn't a lot of data, but 1.5 years ago, and I appreciate that Jason wasn't here, I don't even know if you were here yet, but we said, well, we heard this in 1.5 years, well, I guess.
I was here, and we kicked the can down.
Yeah, and we said, well, we need more information, that was 1.5 years ago, so I don't know if I wanna just, well, that was nice, thanks, 1.5 years, and just say, well, we need some more information, like, I'd like to, are we interested in it or not?
Well, I mean, I think we posed some.
Oh, I know, I mean, that's not, I'm not gonna,
As
I'm
long
not
as
saying.
council agrees with directives to understand what is the startup cost of this, that's something that needs to be understood to get the ball closer.
Yeah.
And to Phil's perspective, if we can have someone from that Hickory group that comes in that can clearly define the benefits they've seen, I mean, I think that would be.
Yeah, I mean, I'm fine, I just don't wanna say, well, let's wait another 1.5 years for more information, and,
I don't think we're looking at that kind of timeline, but to Jason's point, I mean, I may be wrong, but what I'm hearing, there's no case law on this. I mean, so there's nothing to reference about liability and so forth, so we're stepping into somewhat uncharted waters. So, I mean, you know, 1.5 years would be excessive, but I do think we need to extend out the process just a little bit to make sure that we've all got our heads wrapped around it, and that we've got hopefully consensus on the way we want to move forward.
Well, I think a lot of that could be done simultaneously, right? I mean, I think we have some of the resources to, and again, I'm not saying kick it down 1.5 years, but I mean, let's just do our due diligence, right? And make sure that we're all comfortable with it. Because I think I'm interested in it. I think it's an interesting idea. But I think as of today, I mean, me personally, I'm not comfortable with it. So I don't know if we'll ever get to that level, but I think there's some things that we can explore.
Would it be helpful to, I mean, we could have the director from Hickory come down and kind of maybe address some of the concerns that we've talked about here. And then maybe simultaneously, the Main Street folks could take the feedback that we've given them tonight, maybe start refining some of this so that it's a little less, it's a little bit more concrete and less sort of theoretical, and that way, because I think that's part of the problem we've got too, is that we've got 1,000 different directions we could go on this. I think it would be helpful if we sort of narrowed down on the options a little bit, and that would kind of help, I think, address some of the concerns that we've got. If you actually had like a map that there was some reasonable agreement around, and some of the rules and whatnot, and then.
But I think they need maybe some more direction from us before they could do that.
That's what I was gonna say, I mean, we can produce maps all day long, but we're gonna have to bring it in front of you and let you see it. That's what we've done, and that's what we did. Cassidy's met with all these people, has put together the map. There's been a lot of time spent on getting the hours right. We've had input from the police department. So I guess what we would need is a more pointed direction on what you want to see in the next presentation from the social district, because that will be our third.
That's fair.
I don't know, maybe, again, I'm just throwing something out. I know we don't want to add complexity to it, but maybe to limit it to just a couple of days that we seem targeted, that might be appropriate. Again, everyone has to agree on this, but, I mean, this is just my opinion, and maybe even limit kind of maybe that scope, or maybe you keep it the same and just limit the days. I don't know what the mixture is there, but, I mean, that would just be my opinion. Again, I think this could be something that we do as a phased approach, and as we start seeing the successes, Chief and the team start seeing, what's actually needed for resources, then we just kind of throttle it up. I mean, that's how I would prefer to do it. If we did it that way, I mean, I don't see.
Yeah, I mean, that seems to be, I guess, the direction we're headed is a more incremental approach versus kind of a all-in.
Well, I mean, I think the general thing is, I don't think we want to start cutting, as odd as that shape is, I don't think we want to start putting people outside and inside it. It sounds like nobody wants it in Stowe Park. I think that's fair to say.
Well, what's your opinion on that, did you?
I think that's fair to say that nobody wants it in Stowe Park. So, I think it sounds like maybe like limiting it to like the weekend at first or something like that. And then see if it, and I'm not saying that this is even something we ultimately at the end of the day want to move forward with, but if it's something we were going to consider, it seems like those are the points that we've sort of coalesced around.
Well, and then you wanted it limited to beer and wine, right?
That's my opinion. I don't know what you guys.
I don't think I have a problem with that.
I don't either.
I mean, so what if we say here, what if we do to narrow it even further down? Beer and wine, Friday and Saturday, I don't know what the timeline would be, or timing would be, but that would be, I think, a pretty reasonable
Here
target.
comes Chief Falls.
I hate to
Chief
interrupt.
Falls is a
I hate to interrupt. The weekend's great, but I don't have many resources on the weekend as far as the downtown officers. So the weekend's fine, but if you could maybe put a day or two during the weekend there, that would help me as far as gauging for the weekdays.
The point of this is to drive foot traffic. It might help to do it during times when downtown's quieter anyway.
Yeah, but we still want to have a weekend day to sample, in my opinion, so that, let's say the weekday's quiet. All right, let's just I'll throttle it open, and then all of a sudden we have issues on the weekend. I'm trying to get a sample data, right?
Thursday through Saturday,
I was going to say Thursday to Saturday.
Thursday to that Saturday.
Yeah, normally what we do is we take the days and we flex them out for the events that happen on the weekends with the downtown officers. They're kind of heavily involved and move around a little bit on the weekends as far as that goes with hours. So I'd just say during the week would be a good judge for me, but the weekends definitely as well.
Would a Thursday be a good?
I'm not getting into the day.
So I will say, as far as trying to, go back to your comment about, the benefit, our retail businesses are now looking at extending their hours primarily on Thursday evenings. But now previously where they were all closed on Sundays, Now they're seeing the benefit, and some are starting to open now on Sundays to catch that brunch traffic, and, which was pleasantly surprising that some of them have agreed to open on Sundays. Kind of like that 11 to 3, but, I think Thursday would be a good opportunity to encourage our retail businesses to extend their hours and stay open if something like this were enacted.
To that point, Joe, you said kind of taking the pulse on the business owners downtown in this district especially. You said you and Cassidy had kind of, we've talked to, did I usually 7?
I talked to the restaurant and bar owners back in, when the first round of it came out, so 21.
Yeah.
I talked to them. Now, she's been much more active recently with the retail.
And
sort of
field bars and restaurants
Yeah.
as well.
Well, we've got some concurrents around the map, like, we've gotta go in and find out if they wanna participate anyway, right?
Well, they can opt out at any time.
But he means just to kind of get.
Sure,
Right,
yeah, if you
yeah,
want-
yeah.
I mean, if you guys want to hit the ground and ask, absolutely, I mean, we're here to help with that. And we relay what we have heard, from them. But, I mean, absolutely, you could have, when you're doing public, the public time, you could have the business owners come in and do it at the same time. I think that'll be easier as opposed to trying to section it off for a long period of time.
Yeah.
Because businesses can change, opinions can change.
Let's just invite some stakeholders, that's what we're gonna.
Maybe we can have some steak.
As one of the provisions, were we in agreement to eliminate the parking behind City Hall, eliminate the parking areas?
I think that's,
I don't see why it needs to be included.
yeah.
I mean, I would probably prefer removing the parking areas. The only tricky thing I think Joe was mentioning is signage, right? So.
Yeah, I mean, so the way it reads is, and again, I would need some more clarification on this, but contiguous to kind of thing, where I guess it could literally just be the street.
Yeah.
Then if you were contiguous to the street, you could go in, get it, and leave, and then any egress out the back of a participating space would have to have a sign on the door saying no alcohol past this point. So that would more look like maybe up Main Street, down Catawba, up Glenway, maybe Davis, so,
I'm thinking like this, like Beer Buffalo a lot of times.
Is that
That's
something
back,
we
you
could
know.
put on the sign, like you can't take a drink into a vehicle? Would that?
Were we wanting to eliminate the top, is there to say that and use the road by the post office for primal?
If that made more sense, right, right here.
Yeah, I think from a safety, again, I'm not a safety expert, but just thinking this through, I think that might be a little bit of a safer route as opposed to, because Catawba Street's pretty busy. We have a defined crosswalk over there off of Main Street where Catawba intersects, but not one further down there where you're getting closer to the historical society.
Yeah, the problem is there's no real good way to get back to Crime Wall.
Now, I think, yeah, your best route is gonna be Glenway to
Yeah.
the side street.
I mean, I don't want to exclude them, but I also want us to make sure we're not putting anybody in harm's way.
Well, if you
But
cut
again,
out-
by doing that, I'm sorry, but again, by doing that, you, by sending them down Glenway, I mean, it's one thing if they're leaving from the lodge to go that way, they can just make a quick left and they're there. There's no sidewalks on Glenway to get them there, they're gonna be out in the street. So almost going down Catawba to the gravel, keeping them out of the street. May still be an option to get them there, but just to send them down Glenway in the middle of the street, where there's no sidewalks. Something should be.
Yeah,
Should be
the first block of Glenway doesn't have,
Right.
this part right here doesn't have a sidewalk. It doesn't start till here. But again, you can fall back on that if it borders, a designated area, they can participate, so it could, I guess the answer, and just off the top of my head, the answer to the parking lot signage issue would just be, any participating building is, they've opted in as part of the social district because they're contiguous to it, and then just any egress out of any other door would have to have a sign.
Well, essentially, if that was the case, you would basically be encouraging people to buy a drink and walk to the next business.
Well, they would.
And not creating that social hangout spot. I
The
think.
more you restrict it, the less area there is for people to do things, it depends on, I guess, the purpose that you're doing it. But yeah, so you would be, as opposed to people coming down here, maybe walking in front of the Belmont Yoga or whatever, you know, now they're not allowed to go there, they've got to stay on this, just this main drag. So, yeah, you can't, unfortunately, you can't have it both ways. You're gonna have to either decide to include areas like that to allow people to mill around town, which is I guess, really that gets to the intent of the law, and the social district itself, or to limit them just to being able to really bounce in between the people that are contiguous and able to participate in the social district. Alcohol-related issues. There's always a challenge. I mean, I remember in Belmont when Liquor by the Drink was coming in, everything that came around it. I remember that well. And I remember doing the brunch law and going to 10:30 to sell on Sundays and all that. So as these things, they tend to just tiptoe forward, but it is definitely something that deserves adequate consideration for sure.
Well, with what we've given you so far, I mean, you have enough.
Okay, so far, the only thing that I'm taking away from this is remove soap art. That's why we had it a different color, probably figured it. Take soap art out, and then, are we just gonna go with just the streets and just allow people that are contiguous to it to be part of it? And then I've got notes on the limiting the hours, limiting the type of alcohol that can be sold.
I think the main strip, but then you also have to wrap in.
Yeah, then we're pretty much just gonna try, you're picking up.
Would you have to wrap around Glenway on the backside where?
Is it primarily bringing this boundary in to kind of,
I would say
bisect the
that
buildings
takes out a lot of
to
the.
take away the parking lot
I
behind?
think that takes out, that's a lot of parking right there, that takes out a lot
Yeah.
of that liability. So basically, I don't even know, I know you got Honeycomb up there, trying to think of the restaurants that are selling alcohol, but you'd almost just say the right side of the street, but obviously not excluding Honeycomb, of
So
course.
Pita Wheels, though?
Yeah, but we want the retail business.
Right, you want the retail business.
I see what you're saying.
So the dress shop,
I see
all
what
this
you're
stuff.
saying, yep, okay, yeah.
So basically just bring the boundary kind of behind City Hall to the back of the buildings.
Yeah.
One thing that also addresses some of the concerns the police had is people refilling in the cars, but also getting into the car with the cup and driving. You'd separate them from their vehicles somewhat. Does that make sense?
It does. I'm just thinking of here. This, I assume this is the main area of concern as well.
You got jail house.
Well, back here.
No, that's the parking lot behind.
The big parking lot on the side, the Bitter Buffalo on the side.
Oh, yeah.
Well, that's a private lot, isn't it?
I don't that is a private lot, that's the general store's private lot, that's Bearded Buffalo's private lot.
Yeah, so they're gonna be responsible for anything that
And
goes on
then
in that lot.
Pita Wheels, private lot, and then 2 spots, I think, for Spike back there. So I don't think that, now, if you head over to the gravel lot over on the other side of the street, then yeah, that's probably a lot of concern, but I don't think that's, because you wanna include where Heirloom is and kind of that walk-through area, but I think I agree with you on that, Mark. I think that's fine.
Yeah.
So we can pull this in to about here and achieve, and then rearrange this guy here, and achieve most of the mapping concerns.
That's what I'm hearing.
I think so.
I think so.
And to kind of move the ball forward, we'd still like to hear from somebody like Ada Cruz, maybe.
No, yeah,
Oh, sure, absolutely.
So would y'all want to do that in another workshop, or all council members come to a Main Street DPA board meeting? What would be the ideal opportunity to bring someone like the director from Cape
I think another workshop maybe where you bring in where you guys have the director from Hickory?
Honestly, even if it's, obviously, it depends on their availability, but if we can do it in calendar year, like let's say that, primarily that, but I also don't wanna hold this up, I just think, you
Well,
know,
in October, we, like, the Main Street DPA likes to come in and do a workshop.
Oh,
with
that's
council
true. Yeah.
In
Yeah.
preparation for the new work plan development, so we might can just
check
kind
it
of
in for
combine.
that, yeah.
Combine.
And then by then, maybe we have the cost estimates for signage. I mean, by then theoretically, we could pretty much have everything we need to make a decision, right?
Yeah.
It's really costing, I'm really curious about the signs. Because, you know, if you think about the historic, the Belmont Foundation, and that one sign that.
Well, that was a big plaque.
It was a big plaque, but I'm just curious how much the signage is gonna be.
Well, it sounds like it's gonna require a fair amount of signage.
Could.
But they're, well,
It could, yeah, again, it doesn't specify every street has to have it on the sides or anything.
Well, what about,
And some have done the.
Yeah, I was gonna say
details on the
Gastonia
side.
has it on the sidewalk,
Like a decal?
like a detail.
What do you guys think can be less intrusive, right? I mean, obviously when it's.
I think
Well, I mean, they can be seen.
Yeah.
Well, no,
It has to be-
it's not the intention, no, you don't want.
I think you have to make it visible, readily visible, so that we can demonstrate, if ever challenged, that we did exercise our due diligence and it was in the sight line.
Correct.
You know, I mean, I'm not a lawyer, but first thing I would do is like, why'd you put it on the ground? You know, nobody's looking on the ground. You know, I need it in the sight line. Is that how you would approach it?
I mean, I think it's a good idea to have it conspicuous within a line of sight.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And we don't want to, obviously, we don't want to overdo it, but you don't want to underdo it. You don't want signs everywhere, but,
I mean, I'm not saying hide them, but
Yeah.
you also don't, you know what I mean? And then it's like, well, just alcohol signs everywhere.
that's helpful. That is helpful. I think we can get the map in a more firm, position for workshop. What I would ask, is as you go away from here, you're gonna continue to think about this and questions, please email me or Phil, any questions, or Cassidy, any questions you have, so that we can take those into consideration and be prepared for the workshop. In October.
I just had a thought, sorry.
Okay.
We discussed the stuff about the, we had, at our meeting, we discussed, the cup and charges for the cup. And Richard brought up the revenue, and he was asking me, could we just charge like $1 more for the businesses charge $1 more for the cup? That money goes to the police department. I said, whoa, no, we get, ABC sales money. But that is something to think about for, paying for the signs and maybe additional cleanup for the litter. I think you're gonna have more litter, so someone's gotta clean that up. So that's just a thought.
Yeah.
Throwing out there.
No, yeah, I think charging for that stuff definitely makes sense and is something that's easy to justify with the upfront investment that we're gonna do from us.
Marcus, what do you think about it?
About which part?
I mean,
We all have a lot of stuff.
I guess in general, bringing it to the city of Belmont, right?
I mean, really, that's your decision. I mean, he's done a great job explaining pros and cons, and I think once you hear from the Hickory representative, it might clear up any loose ends, and then you make a decision.
I mean, is there any major red flags to you that?
No, I think that Joe's laid it out. I mean, he's got it all together, and he's made a great presentation, I thought.
All right, well, if nothing else, I do appreciate it, and we do want to stay up and full on this, because it's something that continually comes up, and I know it's something that can easily or quickly be done. So, again, if you do have specific concerns that we can address prior to our workshop, that would be very helpful for us.
Thanks for putting all this together.
Absolutely.
A lot of information.
It's very thorough. Do we want to take a 5-minute break? Sorry. All right, break for 5 minutes.
That's what this morning says, I'm gonna break glasses out.
All right. We're back.
We're back.
Bill is up to talk to us about,
Couple things. We're gonna do one at a time here.
yes, we're doing the Dais first.
Yeah, so, this has been a long coming discussion. We did budget for it this year, and we'll talk a little bit about that here in a second, but, Yvette and I got together, and she's welcome to come up. I'm sure there may be IT questions at some point. But we got together, we sat down with the contractor, then some IT professionals, to talk about how we can best utilize this room, if the intent is to make it our permanent, or semi-permanent, we can always move, but permanent council chamber for the foreseeable future. So, a couple of notes at the front about restrictions of this room. This room is, a little long and skinny, right? So, a couple of things, the exits where they're located, and since we kind of like to put all of our council activity up here, we got to remember that we can't block that door, unless we were to move the door, which would be quite expensive. So, the idea behind this drawing you see in front of you was to try to keep everything beyond that door, so we didn't mess with, ADA requirements when it comes to the pathways, and also we didn't get too many issues with, tables being in the way and that kind of thing of the door. So that's the first thing. The second is the ceilings in this, they may seem high, but they're actually pretty low compared to a lot of other council chambers and whatnot. So that's something to be considering when you're talking about risers. So I know a lot of times the council wants to be above so people can see better, so you can see the audience better. So there are some limitations there. The max height of a riser from our contractor's estimate was 7 inches, which isn't much higher. So that does bring in some complications when you're talking about how high the Dais is going to sit and the desks are going to sit. So this is an overall sketch plan of the construction. Again, it's not terribly detailed, and we have a lot of flexibility when we get contractors on board to make changes, pick out the styles, that kind of thing we like. But for the space we have, this was kind of the recommended outlook of it. It includes 9 desks or nine chairs. The reason we included an extra was in the event we have a board that's a little larger than the normal council. Also, if we have maybe a smaller work session where we'd like to involve a department head or some other entity to help kind of be included in the conversation. That's of course optional. We can include as many tables and chairs as you think are reasonable. That's just kind of what we went with. And then this is kind of the front look of the council chamber detail with the actual furniture and how it would be. Just keeping in mind we have to make sure we follow all ADA requirements, because we never know if we're going to have a council member or person utilizing the space who has a little chair and whatnot. I will mention our planning board chair, Matt Hart, reached out to me separately in an email. He reviewed this publicly, and he provided some great feedback to me, and he's an architect if you don't know by trade. He provided some great feedback to me about ADA requirements that he brought to my attention, so certainly we'll review those and any other comments people like him have to make sure that we're as accessible as possible.
So that just, it's a sketch, right?
It's a
not
sketch.
wedded to it. Like if we move forward, that doesn't mean that is going, so we can incorporate the suggestions, and if something is amiss, like I think one of the things he was concerned about was that people wouldn't be visible above the height of the table, like we'd be sitting there like this.
Yeah, that's where the riser discussion comes in.
Yeah.
How high can we get? Do we need to lower?
And we certainly want to have enough room for people to be able to get in, and I don't know if it was going to be raised. Are there steps?
We have to have ramps.
Yes, we have to have ramps.
Yeah.
Okay, I just want to make sure that, those concerns are raised, and moving forward with this doesn't necessarily mean that this is the exact thing.
It's a sketch plan, kind of early, what we think we can fit in the space. And we'll come back to questions here in a second. I just want to make sure you all kind of have an idea of how this will work. So we're estimating that $70,000 for just the furniture riser that will be included in it. This is actually McAdenville's chambers, if you've not been there. Similar design to how ours would need to be, given the space. And then I've got a timeline there from, if we approve the design, or at least a kind of a sketch design tonight, that's kind of what we can see. September, looking at the construction bid, getting some contractors in here to bid the project. Bid opening and contract award in October, giving the contractors time to
we get those back to us. Then hopefully starting early November, maybe late October, depending on how quick the construction contractor can get out here and get mobilized. And then I think our estimate maybe at 2 weeks to a month of active construction. So of course, if we have any meetings scheduled during that time, we would either need to relocate or move something around this room to accommodate a construction area. Something to keep in mind. We try to avoid those as much as possible, but it could occur. Total budget, and then the AV equipment as well that we have a quote for, we're looking at $144,000 in construction and AV equipment costs.
What was budgeted?
Miles mentioned it to me this morning, I can't remember.
It's $116,499.
This would be more than what was in budget.
Yeah, I think if I'm not mistaken, the AV work came a little higher than we originally anticipated. Now, of course, the construction costs associated, the AV is an actual quote, the construction cost is not, so that, again, depending on contractors and availability and material and prices, could be higher, could be lower, I'm hoping a little lower, but there's a lot of unknowns until we get this in front of contractors to take a look at.
Can you talk about the AV upgrades? Because that's something that I've gotten a lot of constructive feedback on in this room.
So to speak.
Yes.
Okay. What was the questions?
Just what would you do as far as AV is concerned?
So, for the AV, so basically what they're gonna do is, definitely we need a new camera. They're bringing in a PTZ camera, which is, stands for pan, tilt, and zoom camera. So it kind of moves around with the room. It's gonna be mounted up on top of the ceiling. So the mount, it'll move, have a wider, a broader vision of sight. So it's not just one little, you can't just see just little beds, you'll see it in a much broader sense. We'll have 10 push-to-talk gooseneck microphones, so something similar like this, but it'll sit out and you guys can control it yourself, whether you want to mute it, if you guys have something to say that's private, or you could press a button.
Can I mute them?
But they have that.
Like the chair of the committee.
And we got these ideas from McKenville too, so.
That happens in there?
Yeah, we
Not that I never do that.
Just one in case, right?
Also, let's see, so we have a lot of controllable zones, so, we're gonna have patched, like a zone where we'll have panels to control all the AV equipment. And also we could actually control it remotely. So I don't have to physically be in here. Right now, there's a gentleman that's sitting behind the wall that's actually managing, control as much as we can with the soundboard. So we have, a new soundboard, a new AV, 18 speakers throughout the, acoustic-wise, it's gonna be a lot better, 18 speakers throughout the room.
That's one of the big ones I always hear is if somebody is sitting in the back, they can't necessarily hear us, so this will remedy that.
Absolutely. Yeah. So I brought in a sound engineer as well too. So they actually were the ones that did the sound acoustics in the gym. Did a really good job with that. Pretty reliable guys that I've known for a lot of years. So yeah. So they came in and they assessed the room for me when I took on the position back in January. So. And that's pretty much it. And they're going to rewire a lot of things with TVs. I know we're having some issues we've had some issues with some of our, we have antiquated equipment, believe it or not. So some of the equipment is.
Fully just open it.
I know, right, but yeah, it is really old. But some of the technologies, it's, if you don't stay on technology, it's all old and obsolete in a year, so.
This building took a while to make, it was designed way before it went under construction, so.
Well, that was a conversation for another day. I do have one question though. I noticed that the estimate is dated May 30th. Would it still be valid under section 4 of the terms and conditions?
Oh, actually, I think this is I think we got them, I think they updated it, because I met with them.
Okay.
Yeah, because actually, we had two quotes, and it was pretty high at the beginning, and I kind of talked to them, and, I mean, we were gonna be, it was high-tech stuff that they had brought in, it was extremely expensive, so I had them tone it down a little bit.
So it's more recent than May 30th?
Yes.
I just want to make sure it's still valid.
Yes,
And it's the same price?
absolutely.
Okay.
Mhm.
Now, we're still paying the outside firm to do the live streaming, right?
That's correct.
And if we did these upgrades, would we still need to do that?
It would eliminate that.
Save?
Yes, can you remind me approximately how much we're spending on that?
Is it $1,500 or?
It's $1,500 a month.
$1,500.
Okay, so, yeah, yeah.
I do want to point out too that, one of the reasons we had a raised floor so we could run all the wire underneath the floor. If not, then we'd have to, this is a concrete floor, you'd have to saw it up or bring things down and trying to get it to the desk, as best we could, so we definitely want some kind of raised, floor to get all the wire underneath.
Because if we don't have a raised floor, then the estimate would definitely be
Much more.
much more.
I think everyone has expressed that they can't see you anyway, so yeah, some kind of raised floor
Right.
works in both directions.
And, just for my clarification too, I think we've discussed this, but wouldn't the camera allow us to project into the televisions as well, the council?
Yes.
Okay.
If
So-
we need, yeah, 'cause it's
That's
gonna
like how
have,
the county does it, like it will switch.
So even if somebody's sitting in the back, what that would mean is they can see you, who's talking, right, when you're talking.
What if there's a presentation that you made?
I think you could do it in the corner, so you still have the presentation, but you would see the council either bigger or smaller. That's my understanding of this.
yeah.
Okay.
So, I mean, really, the floor is open for discussion. Do you like this kind of design? Do you think we need to go back to the drawing board? I mean,
So my only question really is, so when we have a presenter, or like you guys are speaking to us tonight, where are they gonna go?
so the thought would be to maintain this, right, as it currently exists, so we could hold it off to the side, and when we need it, we just pull it kind of similar to how we do it now. Kind of out here, facing the council.
But they would not be on the screen then?
Were we gonna get to the camera, the presenter camera?
No,
Yeah.
it's just one camera.
Okay, so no, they wouldn't. Unless they were to sit, like it's, sit here. I mean, really, the way the meeting is run is, determined by the council.
So from like a practical, I guess I do have another question, from just kind of like the dimensions and everything, I mean, from practicality, do you think there's gonna be enough space, or is it gonna be like City Hall where everyone's on top of each, or was on top of each other?
So this is pretty much the exact same size as
Is it the same as we
this.
had?
Yeah, so if you go, I would reach out to them if you're curious if you haven't been there. It's plenty of space to sit, it's not cramped at all. The reason we went with that design is because that's kind of the best way to fit something into this space. I mean, there are alternatives such as a longer structure, but that has a lot of ADA issues and concerns. And it may not be the best with the low ceiling, so this was kind of what we came up with. But I mean, pretty much if you can imagine it, the city council's done it. So there's really no limit to the creativity. I mean, there's some, like I think Charlotte, some other towns have lowered areas where it's more almost like the House of Representatives, the galleries up here, and you watch the meeting occur. We obviously can't do that, but just, yeah, that's right. But you don't want to be exposed like that.
So if we were to have it, our backs to that wall, and then have it like elongated this way, I don't know, I'm just trying to think.
You'd probably lose a fair amount of seating.
What provides the most efficient space, good?
Yeah, well, I think we were really looking at trying to keep things over here. We talked about that, but we just thought the room was too shallow to accommodate good seating for the public. But I mean, because imagine you'd have to come off at least, several feet off, and you're going to lose a lot of space for audience. I mean, it'd be really long, but then who's sitting in this corner is not going to have any access.
Yeah, it's like with those churches, they've got like the cathedral aisle, and then they convert it to the,
I think this makes more sense.
Yeah.
Let me ask you a question. From the back of what I guess would be the mayor's chair to the back wall showing 5 feet, that seems bigger than the old council chambers, because I know it just seems like there's more room around the chairs. Is that accurate? Because you did have to squeeze.
Yeah, it's not
You
that
have
big.
more than you have right now.
Yeah, because it was very
Yeah,
tight in the
this is,
chambers.
I mean, that can't be more than two.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I imagine I think the old city council chambers, I could be misspeaking, but I doubt it's ADA accessible
Yeah, I
back
don't,
there.
No.
there's no ramp, I think it's just.
Yeah, it's all
Yeah.
stairs.
I don't think it is, so we certainly want to make sure we accommodate ADA with any new. So I think 5 foot giving you more space is a good thing for the mayor. So,
Would we keep Cassidy or Jamie in this area?
yeah, so I think the intent is to keep the city clerk similar, maybe get a more permanent piece of furniture instead of these rolling tables. But we have plenty of room, as you can see, on either side to put the city clerk, so they still have the ability to do their work while the meeting's going on.
Where was the city clerk sitting in the city hall? There's like a desk.
Like here.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's a desk, okay.
Are you showing separate chambers on the side? Like, it almost looks like, is that private chambers?
No, that's just an indication of the measurement
Okay.
from the wall here to the back wall. So really the idea is it would almost be exactly how you're set up now, except you just have a permanent fixture. It's a little narrower with plenty of space on either side to put desks, tables, when you put equipment, storage, whatever.
Just a thought, but like I know when like we're looking at stuff up on these screens, up here sometimes it can be a little difficult to get a good angle. Is there a way, like, I guess there's a couple different ways you could do it as far as like where you could mount a TV, or you could even do it in the actual like piece of furniture. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, I assume something could be done about that. I'm not sure though.
Oh,
That's a good point.
You could make these, TVs right here, like,
Like
on
tilt
a
them in.
different mount and swivel it in, maybe one or two swivel it in like that. That's easier to see.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Possibility.
We could probably do that. I mean, given that there's gonna be no one really looking at these screens, other than maybe the presenter, but the presenter, you could have their material with them or maybe with the
Yeah.
back wall.
Yeah, because I just don't like having to like turn around. But,
I don't blame you, yeah.
Yeah.
no, but I mean I like it.
Okay.
So are you saying the way that this is laid out here, this horseshoe, is basically dimensionally the same configuration we have now, or will it be a little tighter?
It'd be a little tighter because if you look at the, kind of use the door as reference, this would be beyond the door. So you'd be a little tighter, but given, see how long, these tables are very long, you wouldn't have that much space, so you'd have to get used to maybe a smaller space.
Sure.
But it'd be enough for you to still do your work. And also we did probably include like USB and power outlets at each of the stations. So you can plug in laptops.
What's the additional seat for again?
So we don't have to have it. We kind of put it in there because we were thinking if you have a larger meeting where you need a department head or somebody to sit at the table. If you don't think that's necessary, we can pull it out.
I would honestly suggest pulling it out to provide more space for the actual meetings, and presenters can just, if we're gonna continue the podium situation, I don't know, that's just my
Well,
suggestion.
visually, I mean, spatially, if you look at it, you don't want to impinge the path of that door. So where Alex's, the edge of his desk is, where the edge of this desk is, and you're putting 3 more seats in compared to what we already have. There's 6 from you. So you're putting 3 more seats in, it is going to be, and you're bringing it further off that back wall.
Sure.
I mean, this looks pretty spaced out, but my sense is that it's probably going to be, just my 2 cents.
Yeah, I mean, if we take that one desk, one chair away, then that's more space to spread everybody out.
Makes a chair.
That's fine.
What would the timeline be on this, just out of curiosity?
So rough timeline, if we approved it, if you guys were happy with the design tonight, I could go ahead and proceed with getting some bids for construction, and, getting some thoughts on that. And once we get all those in, hopefully that'll only take a few weeks, and having by early October, having an idea of who the contractor's gonna be, and I can bring that back to council. If they have maybe some samples we wanna look at, make some decisions about what we want the furniture to be, what we want the style to be, and then, hoping, before Thanksgiving, having completed construction.
Wow, so
So the newest council members from the election, we can just remove their seats.
That's up to you.
You first year hazing.
Make them stand,
Yeah.
We'll do a standing desk for everybody, so.
Hey, there we go. Get one of those buttons that just. I'm just kidding. I like it. No, I like it. But yeah, I do say mix that one seat.
Yeah. If we keep the podium, it makes sense to have them in front end.
And overall design, okay with the horseshoe design, makes sense to everybody?
Are we getting that stained glass window too?
We're gonna cut out a foot of concrete. And we're gonna find a stained glass window.
No, I've actually been to McAdams. It's really nice. I went there with two of the.
Well, it's an old church, isn't it?
Yeah.
It is. I think Mr. Carstarfin and them actually did all that work for them. So.
Well, I mean, I think this design is pretty standard from what I've seen.
It's not too, too much of a new design. It's pretty standard for most areas. And you really gotta work with what you have as far as space, right? Because if you have more of a kind of horizontal dais, this takes up a lot of space, and it's tough to gives me chairs behind that. This allows us to get the chairs we need, but also get the AV projects done as well.
To put in perspective, Mount Holly did this recently too, didn't they, with their new building over there when that was, I think in 2009. 2009.
Yeah, and their room is kind of more like almost like a ballroom kind of design, so they had a lot more space to kind of play with than we did, unfortunately. Yeah, if you've been there, it is very nice chambers that they have.
I voted there.
Well, they probably actually designed their room to be a chamber. So there's, this is sort of.
We're kind of fitting in.
Yeah.
That's true too.
All right. Well, I mean, if there's a consensus, and I'll, and Miles is okay with it, I'll proceed with trying to get the contractors lined up to come take a look and bid on it.
Is this something that requires a motion for us, or just operate?
I don't think so.
Okay.
I think there's consensus.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
Any other questions or feedback?
No, no.
Thank you, Bill. Appreciate it. I'm gonna ask Jennifer Gibson to come up real quick. If we're ready to move on to the next item.
Yep.
Okay.
Lead and copper.
Yeah, so, she's gonna pass you out a little handout that's gonna be useful. We plan on putting this on our website as well, whenever we, get moving to lead and copper. So, you've probably heard it before, and it's become a hot topping point, especially politically in the last few years. Have you heard of Flint, Michigan, and their crisis?
I've been to
There you go. How was the water?
I haven't been recently.
It's probably not the best tasting water.
No.
So, of course, our goal, and of course, Jennifer Gibson, if you haven't met her, she's our water treatment plant superintendent. So I kind of tasked her with being the lead on this project. So the EPA and the NCDEQ, under the guise of the EPA, has come up with new regulations in the past few years to help municipalities, to get municipalities to start being a little better about identifying lead in our distribution system. So we currently have limits we do sampling currently, and Jennifer can expound on that a bit more here in a second, but we already have a lot of requirements we have to meet. This kind of is a new revision that goes above and beyond what we've had to do in the past. Now, I do want to, of course, make it clear to the council, we historically have never had any problems with lead in our drinking water that we're aware of, and we've always had good numbers coming back from all of our sampling as well. So it's never been a concern for us. We use a corrosion control agent in our food, in our water, not our food, in our water, that helps keep the lines, especially lead service lines, from corroding and eroding over time. So that's part of the process, and I think a lot of these towns have had issues, didn't use those agents properly. So, in essence, what we have to do next, our next steps as a utility, is we've got to create an inventory list of the entire city of Belmont, actually outside the city of Belmont, all customers attached to our system, and we've got to get a inventory of not only our side of the service line, but also the customer side. We need to know what the customer side has. Now, we don't have to replace the customer side, but we have to make the customers aware if they have a lead service line.
And if they choose to replace, don't we have to?
We are obligated to replace within 60 days.
I can't quite remember it. I know there was something mentioned about they wanted both sides, like if the city was gonna fix, they wanted the owner to fix theirs as well. They said if you didn't, there was no point in the city. But yes, when one is replaced, the other is supposed to be replaced
Within a certain time frame. And then we have to provide, the utility has to provide water filters for 6 months after that work is completed. So,
Bill, do you have any idea of what the scope is in this for the city of Belmont? Like what a percentage is out of the total, what we have?
as far as lead,
Yeah.
not much.
Not much at all? Okay, okay.
Yeah, and unfortunately, we don't have very many records.
We don't have a lot of records, so
You said-
I say that without many records.
I'm sorry, B. You don't have much of an idea as opposed to there's not much lead.
Well, speaking from operational experience and our teams taking lines in the system, we do not have many lead service lines in our system.
What about copper?
Operational. Oh, we have all kinds of copper, but copper's got different restriction requirements. We actually put copper in, we prefer that now.
Because this doesn't include copper within its scope, does it?
No, copper would just be, we'd have to identify copper, but copper has no additional requirements.
Okay.
It's primarily lead.
The lead.
Yeah,
Okay.
so, the goal of the EPA and NCDEQ is just that pretty much the city we have to be able to provide, if somebody calls us and says, do I have lead service line? We've got to be able to tell them. And if we don't know, that's okay, but we have to treat them like they do, if we don't know.
Now, is this funding, is this coming out of our budget, or is this coming from like federal or state funds?
Tests have always come out of our budget, but they're really not that expensive. But before, all we did was residence homes, and it would be about $35 a home. And we tested, I think, 35, and we were on reduced monitoring because we never found lead. So that would be every 3 years, we would do 35 homes, at about $35 a test, and it was one bottle, you tested for lead and copper. In the future, it's gonna be different. They're gonna be running 2 different samples, so you're probably looking at more money per home.
But that's a different thing than what we're talking about with this exercise, because like, if you test and it shows lead, that doesn't necessarily mean there's a lead. You have to figure out whether the pipe is lead or not.
So who bears that portion of along with the replacement of it? Is it gonna be?
It's the city of
Belmont.
Belmont. So if you recall at the last council meeting, we did apply for some potential funding.
Yep.
Through DEQ. They have some funding out there. Most of it is not grant funding. I've been informed. Most of it's going to be low interest loans. So yeah, so the EPA pretty much said, hey, all you small utilities, you got to do this.
We're not going to give you any money.
We're not gonna give you any money. Okay, that's what I was saying.
That sounds about right.
And so, well, what we're doing right now, I wanted to say what we're doing right now is Jennifer and our team, pretty much we've gotten as far as we can without starting to get the public's help. And without you getting calls from residents when they're like, why did I get a survey about lead in my system? We want to make sure that the council is well informed about this before you start getting calls about lead and people panicking. We don't want there to be a panic. We don't have any concerns. This is something every utility is having to go through. So we're going to be doing some surveying. So hopefully homeowners who have older homes, because homes built before a certain date are the only ones that are really affected, and it's in the 80s when lead was banned. They will be getting, we plan mailing out notices about, hey, a survey, do you know what you have? Because they may not. On top of that, we're going to be sending out field operations staff to be visually inspecting meter boxes. And when you have people inspecting meter boxes of 2,500 homes, somebody's probably going to be like, what's going on? So we wanted to make sure we're just informing everybody, keeping everybody on the same page, that we will be doing this. We're going to be doing a mass field operations mission out there. We're going to be doing surveying, and then we're going to have a website posting, so a page kind of with this information, just to give the public an idea of what's going on.
So maybe it might be prudent, I mean, I know that we have this chemical that mitigates the release, but we might want some literature in regards to, let's say my home does have a lead pipe, and obviously I'm freaking out, right? Particularly if you're not specialized in this field, so we might wanna have some literature ready in that instance that someone does have a lead pipe feed into their house, so that they can easily go to, as opposed to, you know, because if I'm calling and I can't get anybody for any odd reason, you know, that's gonna be probably pretty frustrating, particularly if it is, that just might be an idea for
Yeah,
that.
one of the main things we want to stress is that your water is safe to drink, even
Right.
if there is lead in our system, because we are feeding this chemical that it won't let the lead leach into the water. That's what happened in Flint, Michigan. For some reason, they weren't feeding corrosion control. I don't know if it was a money thing, they were trying to cut corners, but that's when all the lead leached and people started to get sick, and it affects children, of course, more than adults. That's another big difference. Testing in schools, is required now.
Mhm.
And they only require, how many percent, is it 20?
20% every 5 years, so that in 5 years, each school would be tested, but.
Our plan is, we kind of discussed internally as staff, we're gonna go ahead and test all our schools and daycares first year. Just so we start with, you know, we didn't wanna have to pick and choose which schools to pick the first year, you know, because that could make it look like we're, you know, picking favorites, but we're just
People
gonna
are
do
be panicked already, maybe, I mean, we're trying to alleviate that as much as possible, and I think testing all the schools would go a long way with the public.
Yeah, so, so this is, and I did attach in the agenda, I dropped in a PowerPoint presentation from, and I can't take credit for that, that's from NCDEQ that they shared at the North Carolina Rural Water Conference earlier this year. It's got tons of good information that you can review, and if there are, it's public as well, so if you want to share any of the information with concerned residents or family or whomever, you're welcome to do so. There's still a lot of unknowns, like the funding question, that kind of thing. For now, we're going to be moving ahead with internal staff time and all that to get as far as we can. We've gotten all of our service lines down to about 2,500 service lines that we still don't know about. And that's mostly core Belmont, older Belmont that has been here before the 80s. So we're going to be moving straight ahead as fast as we can about identifying those that we can by visually inspecting and using surveying. Hopefully get this down to as small as possible, and if we have to, doing some potholing, which is simply just digging. And if we can't see it at the meter box.
What's the timeline on this, you think?
Really depends on how fast or where it's located. I think a few months. I think we'll be done well before the October deadline, which is when the inventory needs to be completed.
October of next.
Not this year, next year.
Right.
So we're kind of ahead of the curve here. We're trying to get ahead of this. I think by spring we can have our visual inspections done, and then at that point we'll be assessing whether or not we want to take further steps. We do have to have a service line replacement plan, which I think the details of which are vague about what they're requiring. That may be something we may need to consult out, depending on how in depth it needs to be. Once we have a better idea about funding mechanisms that the state has, that could be an option we explore.
So let me just understand, this whole endeavor is about preparing an inventory, and once we have this inventory, if I understand correctly, we're a small system, is that correct? So we just need to make it accessible, we don't need to make it like posted on the
Correct.
internet or anything. Should anyone, like you said, call and ask, we need to be able to tell them. So now you're saying we need to come up with a plan at some point.
A replacement plan.
A replacement plan, well, that would imply that that plan would have to be implemented at some point, which would mean replacement. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Yeah, that's why they got those low interest loans.
Yes.
That's
So,
correct.
so while this particular exercise does not involve actually replacing any pipe, that day is coming, is what you're saying. And,
Yes.
and that would be at our expense.
Yes, our side of the service line would.
Well, yeah.
Yes. The customer side would have to be at the customer's expense.
What if the customer chooses not to do so?
If we don't replace their service line.
And we don't have any liability?
I think they have to sign something.
Yeah, I think will be some sort of forms for that. And again, this is yet to be implemented, so there's some untested, principles that will certainly come about.
What do you mean by what is yet to be implemented?
The plans.
Well, right, because they haven't
been developed yet. So
formulated.
it's I think it was last year we went to the Rural Water Conference, and everybody's asking panicking, what do we got to do? And they changed the feedback on whether or not we're going to include goosenecks, whether or not we're not going to include, or we're going to include mains. There was all kinds of questions that even the state at the time didn't know. So until the EPA released some of its regulations, so it's kind of been a slow drip of more information. So
So got my hopes up momentarily that the regulations had not been implemented yet, that maybe they would not be implemented, but.
No, as far as I know, they have a deadline.
Yes.
Unless maybe a court case or something will pop up between.
Well, I can think of some other things that might pop up between now and then, but.
Such as an election?
Yes. But perhaps that's just wishful thinking.
Yeah, so really internally we're working towards this. We just wanted to get the information in front of the council so you have the tools you need to answer questions. And of course, direct any questions you don't know. You don't have to guess. You can call myself, call Jennifer, and even if we don't know the answer, we can try to find it. Jennifer, do you have anything you want to add that I missed?
No, I think pretty much that we've, like you said, done everything we can up to this point without involving the public, and of course we didn't want to do that without consulting with you guys first. So the next step will be getting some general information on a website that's very similar to this for citizens to see, and we're going to have help from them probably. I mean, public works guys are going to be out trying to do visual inspections, but if we could knock some of these out, with surveys, that would be very helpful too. So just, right now maintaining this inventory, and hopefully, once we get all this information out to the public, it's very general. I mean, you could put a whole lot more on the website, but I think, there's other cities that already have websites, and that was one thing I was concerned about, is if some of our citizens saw that and they're like, hey, what's this Leslie Copper stuff about that everybody's gonna have to do? But a lot of them have FAQs, so maybe adding something like that in. But yeah, just making people aware. They may be getting calls here at City Works or with billing or whatever. We just want to equip people with what they need to know, to keep citizens' concerns to a minimum.
So when are you planning on kicking off the public campaign?
So I think after the meeting tonight, we'll get started immediately on the survey and get it posted to the website as soon as possible.
Okay.
And just get moving right away. And then I'll pull the trigger on the field operations and start getting that underway as our staff has time to do it. It'll kind of be kind of a something that our utility staff can do when it's a little slower, maybe as fall comes and the leaks are less frequent.
Probably a good thing we authorize the approval of that new position in the customer service / KDB then, right? Because they're probably
Potentially with the
fielding
call
a lot of
volume,
calls.
All right.
Sorry, what? Geese, there's geese.
Oh, the geese, they've come back after the construction.
I heard you talking about goosenecks.
Yeah,
Interesting.
which if this diagram actually shows you the different parts of a service line, just in case you're curious. Weirdly enough, goosenecks, there's more lead goosenecks in the system than there are lead service lines, but they aren't included in the inventory. But if we find lead goosenecks, we have to replace them. That's kind of the rule that they're setting on us. So.
And it used to be lead solder as well,
Yeah.
but now they don't really seem to be concerned about that. They're mainly concerned about the service lines themselves.
Where does the customer's portion of the service line typically begin? Is it metered?
Right up near meter. Yeah. We maintain up to the meter, and then after that it's private. So, and I imagine it'll be quite challenging if we do have lead service lines that we do find. Because historically, the places that have lead service lines are probably older homes in older neighborhoods. It's going to be tough to get buy-in from the community to pay for replacement of those lines, but regardless, we'll have to have a plan in case they do want to replace their service line.
Or a waiver if they don't.
Correct.
And how was, again, you briefly mentioned it, but the 35 home testing sites every other 3 years or every 3 years or so? I mean, do we have the data on that?
Well, this right here is, the 2022 was our most recent group of tests that we did, and we did not detect any lead in any of our samples, and there was one detect of copper, but it was far below the MCL, so.
And where was that primarily tested at? Do we know, or is it?
Well, there's a few neighborhoods that,
Is it, if it's like a newer neighborhood, then probably not, but like if we're looking at downtown Belmont, where you've got homes that were built in the 20s and the 30s and stuff like that?
there really weren't any that old, because from the previous, the lead and copper rule from before, they call it different tiers. They want you to start with tier 1 homes, and they had different criteria then. So all the homes there, it's mostly around 1985. So like, I think it's Abbey Place, that neighborhood off of,
That's where I live.
off of McCadville Road. There's several homes in there. There's some around Dory Drive.
Oh.
But, I mean, once again, there've been no detects of lead.
Yeah, and also the sampling method is changing for that too, so we're gonna take a lot more water than previously.
Yeah, it's more complicated, and everything about this is tricky, because before, the homeowner has to get the sample, because it's got to be collected first draw. You want the water sitting in the line for at least 6 hours. So we drop the bottles off at the homeowners with a letter with instructions about a week before, and say, collect the water. And they've already agreed at this point, like these same homes have been tested every 3 years. Sometimes you'll have where somebody's moved and you might not have compliance at that house because the new owner doesn't know what's going on. But anyway, after 6 hours, they would collect the first draw as soon as they turn the tap on, and they record the time, and then we input that data onto a sheet and turn it into the lab. But anyway, now it's going to be 5 liters, and they're going to sample the 1st and the 5th, and then one of those may be used for copper, or there may be a completely separate bottle. So it's just, to me, I think it's going to be confusing for the homeowners. Before you really
5
didn't,
1 liter bottles.
yeah. Before you really didn't know if they were doing it right, and now I feel like you're really going to question, are they doing this right?
But we're just gonna have to figure it out.